It's the pre-show, everybody. It is the N10-007 Network Plus Study Group pre-show. We got about 10 minutes before we get started with the pre-show or with the actual show. This is 10 minutes of non-show. It's the part where I make sure everything's working. Let's pop the chat out, put chat over here, put the rest of this over there. Hi, chat room. Hi, everybody. It's all Network Plus today. We got lots going on. Hello, Mesquite, Texas. Hello, Canada. I will let Mrs. Professor Messer know that Canada has checked in. It's always important. We get those things going. Dominican Republic is here. India is checking in. Welcome. We've got all Network Plus questions in the first hour, and then in the second hour, I will open up the phone line. So my down here in the bottom right, that thing that's circling around, that is my video recorder. So it's recording this locally. I've also got a streaming server. This is actually the screen of that server that is up here on my upper left. And so that's also another local recording. And then, of course, it is recording on the YouTube, which you're watching this on. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Hello, Houston, Texas, and USA, and Lebanon, and Bolivia, and Guyana, and DC. Yes, there are continuing education credits available. A webinar category continuing education credit will be made available to you sometime in the first hour. So listen in for the first hour, and you'll be able to see all of that. Pop up a new browser window and get ready to go to professormesser.com/QA for the question and answer. I'll tell you all about that as we get going. Nigeria is here, South Africa, South Carolina. We got the Souths taken care of. St. Vincent is here. This video is available on the YouTube. It is available immediately afterwards. This is being streamed live through YouTube Live. So as soon as I stop the recording, it takes a few minutes to process, but then it is immediately available afterwards. So unless something went terribly wrong, sometimes I have to edit. Sometimes I do something wrong. Sometimes you do something wrong, and I have to edit and post a new version. But that doesn't usually happen. Usually we just go with it. Hello, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Augusta, Georgia, home of the Masters. There's Manchester, England. Chicago's here. Welcome. Ukraine. Hello, there's the Florida people. Hello, Florida people. More Canada. There's Fort Worth, Texas. Atlanta. Welcome. Nigeria, South Africa again, Sri Lanka, Austin, Texas, Portland, Oregon. We got all over the place. All over the world checking in. Let me check my cameras. I am good here. I've got things to check. You can't see the screen that I'm looking at. There's a screen that is above this. You can't see. It's kind of up here. There's a screen up here, a big 55-inch, 60-inch television that I have here that's showing me all of the different cameras and what the preview is and what the program is. So that's why you'll often see me as I'm talking to you on here, but you'll see me occasionally look up, and that's what I'm looking at over here. And down here, that's my main screen. So that's why my eye tends to be in different places as we are going through this. Hello, DC. Both DC is here and Baltimore, Maryland, right next door to each other. There's Houston, Texas, St. Lucia, Sierra Leone. Welcome. We've got about 6 minutes before we get started. So recordings look good. Cameras look good. Content is ready to go. I should probably just go ahead and get that set up. So this is the slide. This laptop has the slides that you see with my head in the corner. So that's the questions and answers. And then in the front, of course, you can see that is the online answer part that you will see. So we'll have to do a video on this whole setup here eventually, document how this is going. And then I've got other things I've just kind of thrown over here. There's a set of headphones and editing equipment, and it's usually not used. So things like this that I use during the editing process, I just kind of put over here. But I've got a lot of things I need to remove from here. There's a gaming controller and that I was trying to use. I was trying to replace this controller, this piece here, modify it to be a gaming controller, but that did not work out. So we just stuck with that. Stick with what works, I say, for all of those. Marty says you passed both A+ tests and taken the Network Plus. So I can't. Did you take the Network Plus Sunday? You're taking the Network Plus Sunday. Is that what this is? So this will be a good overview if that's the case. And Washington State, Tina says, starting your networking class in a couple of days. That's good. I love networking. Networking is where I really got into technology. I was doing tons of operating systems, Microsoft Windows, even back in the DOS days. There was plenty to do. But when I first saw packets, when I first saw the breakdown of the packets going across the network, that changed everything for me. So I just have a real soft spot in my heart for networking professionals. I just think it's one of the coolest parts of technology. But that's just me. There's plenty of interesting things I've done since then that sort of has led me into that, especially on the security side. If you know the networking, you'll certainly know the security side. So that's kind of how that works. El Salvador's here. There's another Florida. If you're like us here in Florida, you're a bit rainy right now. I didn't even close the curtains to the outside because the sun is nowhere to be found because of the hurricane that's going in Louisiana and Alabama. Kentucky's here. Hawaii, welcome. Get some of those going. We'll have to see if we can get more of this content on soon. You know, we're working on our Security Plus right now. Security Plus is being updated. The new Network Plus, did I even put when the new one is coming? I should have updated this slide because there were some updates. Yes, okay. So I got the updates for dates on Network Plus. We'll talk about that. That looks good. England, welcome. Thank you for being here. There's a Bronx, New York. Thank you for being here. Kenya's here. Virginia Beach, D.C. We've got about 3 minutes to go. I've got, I think, everything laid out. So I think we're in good shape. Things are falling down already. Yeah. It's always good when things go well. You have time left over during the setup. It's when you turn everything on and something isn't working that suddenly you don't have enough time. So it's one of those situations. In this case, everything turned on just fine, and we're in good shape. We just did 2 of these last week. So we did the A+ last week. So the studio was sort of ready to go. There wasn't much to change. Normally there's not much different here. Usually the laptop is not here. Usually this screen in front of me is closer to me. It's on an arm, so I just pick it up and move it closer. But that's pretty much the only difference during the week. There's not much else that changes in here. This is exactly where I always sit to write everything. So it works out. I'm worried about this chair that I'm in, though. I'm concerned the chair is not going to last much longer. It's one of those that I've had for so long. So I just imagine during a video that suddenly the hydraulics in it give out, and suddenly I start falling down. Would you like the setup? You're more than welcome to it. It's really a little overdone in some places. It has been an evolution of things that I've put together here. It did not used to be anything close to this. It has really evolved over time, but it's a good setup now. I probably went a little bit too overboard on the audio, except it's just been rock solid and works like a champ. It's amazing. So I can't complain. We upgraded to 4K last year about this time. So this is all 4K video switching equipment. So that's all relatively new. And it's so much smaller. And it used to be multiple devices that were everywhere. Now it's just a box. Just sits here. Does 4K. It's amazing. It's remarkable to have all of that there. Less than a minute to go. We'll get Network Plus going. All of those things. We'll have to figure out the details of this. 30 seconds. We could move this down. That's good. All right. I think we're in pretty good shape, everybody. It's all Network Plus all the time today. And then next week, of course, Security Plus. So I haven't written those questions yet. That's what I'm doing tomorrow, is writing questions. No, we haven't even started. Not only has the first question not been asked, we're just getting going. 5 seconds to go. Let's see if we can get the presentation up here. I need a green light from my iPad here. Do we got a green light? Yes, we do. That looks great. Here we go, everybody. Let's do a study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2020 Professor Messer Network Plus study group. This is our N10-007 study group, to be specific, where we will, in this first hour, ask you questions live and in person here on the internet, where you will be able to answer questions directly from the N10-007 exam objectives. There will be plenty of questions. I've got them all ready to go. The way that you'll be able to participate is to pop open a new browser window. And in that new browser window, you want to visit this page. It's professormesser.com/QA. That's the link you want to go to. That will pop open a question on your screen, and then you can just stay on that page for the duration of this hour. And of course, you can answer the question that is waiting for you once you are there. If you'd like to use a mobile app to do the same thing, there's an app available in your favorite app store called the Socrative Student app. It's Socrative is what we use to be able to provide this functionality. So the app you want is the student app, not the teacher app. And in that app, it will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right. PROFESSORMESSER. And if you do all of that, there will be a question waiting for you. And that question asks, a desktop administrator needs to control the screen of a Windows 10 workstation from their Mac OS laptop. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be VNC, RDP, SNMP, SSH, or IPsec? You have 5 choices to choose from. No answering in the chat room. Please answer online at professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answer there, and we will come back to that question in just a moment. Thank you for joining us on this study group. We've got a lot of questions to go through. We do this practically every week. You can always go out to our calendar on the Professor Messer website to see when the next event is going to be. For instance, the Security Plus study group is next week. You'll be able to see exactly when and where by going to professormesser.com/calendar. Of course, all of our videos, every training video, everything we make, we put out for free on the YouTube. You can find it at professormesser.com/YouTube. We also do a weekly Network Plus question that you can find on Twitter and on Instagram. Same question. And go to professormesser.com/Twitter or /Instagram, both of those, and being able to do that. So that might give you a place to go to be able to look for those. It's a great way to learn a little bit more about Network Plus before you go into the exam. Let's talk about Network Plus. There's a little bit of information that leaked out of CompTIA this week. So I'll bring you up to date on some of the most recent timings for Network Plus. The N10-007 is the current version of the exam. It was released on March the 1st of 2018. Now, we usually will see a retirement of that usually about 3.5 years after that date. So we would expect the N10-007 to be retired somewhere in the second half of 2021. However, got an email from CompTIA this week that was discussing other things relating to Network Plus, but it talked about how the retirement of N10-007 is probably going to be somewhere near the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, or somewhere in there. So they've pushed it a little bit, probably because of all of the changes that have happened in scheduling this year. So it seems to be it got pushed a little bit further out at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. And that's an estimate at this point. We don't have specific dates. I'm extrapolating a little bit based on what I heard on the, or what I read on the email. But we will see what that ends up being. So always keep checking back on the CompTIA website. I am not a CompTIA person, so I'm not inside their organization. I'm learning these things as you do. So keep checking the CompTIA website for that. The exam that you'll take will be 90 minutes long. It's a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions. And the scoring is on a scale from 100 to 900. You have to score a 720. Each question's worth a different number of points. So we don't know exactly what that score will end up being, how many questions you have to get right. We know you have to get a 720. Finally, that's the only thing you really know. So just do the best you can and hopefully you'll be over 720 when the exam is done. The exam is a combination of multiple choice questions, which we just looked at, and some performance-based questions, which we'll talk about in just a moment. All of my study materials, all of my videos are available to watch online for free, but you've probably been to my site and seen that I have course notes available for Network Plus. I have another book that I've written, a small ebook that is 14 different tips on taking the exam. I call that my Exam Hacks ebook. And that is one that doesn't talk about Network Plus or A Plus or Security Plus or any specific certification. It talks about how can you do your best during the exam process, before the exam, during the exam, and actually after the exam as well. I also have MP3 audio files. There is special access you get to this study group to ask questions if you are someone who owns my Network Plus Success Bundle. And if you want to get all of those together, you'll find them on my website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. I also want to make you aware that there is an audio-only replay of this available as a podcast. You'll find that at professormesser.com/podcast, where my A Plus, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups are. So if you are a podcast user, you have a podcast app that you use, and you would just like these to be downloaded automatically so they're waiting on your mobile device. You don't, at that point, need an internet connection. You could be traveling, you could be working out, you just start her up, and you'd be able to listen. You can also stream from that page as well at professormesser.com/podcast. Our thanks as well to my marketing manager, Lori, who listens to this entire study group on the replay and puts timestamps into the YouTube video description. You've probably seen this. If you've gone back to the video about a day later, you'll see that all of the timestamps are there. All you have to do is click on the timestamp, and it takes you directly to a question or directly to an answer, which is great. So Lori is listening to this right now on the replay, and she's watching the chat go by on the chat replay. So say hello to Lori, everybody. Thank you, Lori, for getting these done. I know that everybody appreciates having all of those available. Let's talk about that question we asked earlier, which was a desktop administrator needs to control the screen of a Windows 10 workstation from their Mac OS laptop. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be VNC, RDP, SNMP, SSH, or IPsec? Which one of those is going to be able to have that work? Let's see what you thought the answer was. 61% of you said it's RDP, but 30% of you said VNC. Only 6% said SSH, only 2% said SNMP, and 0% said IPsec. The real key here is that we needed to control a Windows 10 workstation, and we just happened to be on Mac OS, but we could have really been on anything. The real key was that we were needing to control Windows 10. And if you're needing to control Windows 10, then you need something like Remote Desktop, RDP, to be able to make that happen. And there are clients for RDP if you're running Linux or Mac OS or iOS or Android. You can use so many different clients to be able to communicate and connect to Windows devices that are using Remote Desktop Protocol. That is the most likely one that you would use. If you were doing this in reverse and you were on Windows 10 needing to control Mac OS, then you would probably use VNC. And that's where the differences were with this question. This question very specifically asked how you control a Windows 10 workstation. Now, of course, for some of you that are familiar with VNC, you could load the VNC server on Windows 10 and then use VNC, but the question also asked which of the following would be the best choice for this task. And of course, RDP is built into Windows 10, so why not just use what's built in? That would be the best answer, the best choice to use for this. That is our rewind question of the month. If you were somebody who was here last month, you probably recognized that question, and maybe you remembered it. So a lot of you got that one right. The correct answer was indeed B, RDP, Remote Desktop Protocol, for that piece. Now, one of the things that I also mention, and this is an important part of the Network Plus exam, it's A Plus exam, Security Plus exam, the first handful of questions you get at the beginning of the exam will not be multiple choice. So multiple choice is the question we just did, where there's a question and there are multiple choices to choose from, and you've got, in this case, a 20% chance, A, B, C, D, or E. And you could even guess, and if you hit that 20%, you get the question right. But CompTIA makes it a little bit harder than that. At the very beginning of the exam will be 5 questions or more or fewer, somewhere a handful or so, that are not multiple choice questions. They call these performance-based questions. It's not multiple choice. So it could be a fill-in-the-blank question. It could be putting things into a certain order. It could be a drag-and-drop question. It could be a question that you're putting things and matching them. Maybe you're putting them in order from first to last or from highest to lowest. It depends on what the question is like. So the real question is, how do you handle that type of question? Obviously, the content on this question comes directly from the exam objectives, but I want to give you one that kind of gives you a broader scope. This is more of a fill-in-the-blank question I'm giving you, but it's really interpreting this as if you are sitting at the command prompt and you now need to solve this command prompt problem. So here is your performance-based question of the month, and this question asks, display the MAC address of another network device. This could be any network device that's on your network. This may require 2 separate commands. What would be the best way to do this? So think about how you would make this happen. I want to see the MAC address of another network device on this network. How would you do that? So this may require 2 separate commands. I don't want to see the MAC address of this device, of the device you're on. I want to see the MAC address of another network device. And therein lies the twist. And so there may be 2 separate commands you would have to run to be able to do this. There's actually a couple of ways to do this, but there's probably one that is most common that you would run into. How would you make this happen? At least one person knows the answer to this. So I wasn't too far off in asking what you would provide here to be able to have this here. So feel free to put it in, lock in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Please no hints in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. We're going to try to figure this out. What would you use? Now, some of you are giving me one command, but what if that one command didn't give you the MAC address of the thing you were interested in seeing? I'm giving a little bit of it away. So that's why I sometimes mention it may require 2 separate commands. And what would those 2 commands be to be able to have that there? So this is one you really do have to think about. If this was an actual exam, they would probably put you in a command prompt. I'm going to bring up my command prompt here. They probably put you right here at the command prompt, and they'd say, go. Here's your problem. I want you to tell me the MAC address of the default gateway. Go. And now you have to do it. And that's all you have. It's just the blinking cursor to go with. How would I do that? What process would I go through to make that happen? Well, that's a good question. Maybe it's one that you know, and being able to figure out all of these. This is one that you might be familiar with this. Sadly, you are not at a Cisco switch or a Cisco router to do this. You're sitting at a command prompt, as I showed you. So your show command won't work, so sorry. Plus, you've disabled CDP because that's an enormous security issue, so that's not going to work anyway. That's one of those situations. So that's one where if you start stepping through these problems, this is going to be a good one to do. Plus, if you already know a showed CDP command, you already know how to do this at the command line. Anyway, it's the same command whether you're on Linux, Mac OS, Windows. So here's your hint if you want to go through that process for that and figuring out these pieces. Let me show you how I would do it. And at least give you an idea. This happens all the time, by the way, with network professionals. You're on a network. You've been told that a particular device is at a certain IP address, and you're now needing to be able to confirm that you are communicating properly to that device. Maybe you're not pinging it properly, and maybe you're wondering why you're not getting a ping. Is the ping working properly? What is going on with those? One of the things I might want to do, let's see if I can do this. I want to be able to pull up an IP address that I don't currently have. One moment. I'm going to type some things in on my computer and see if I can figure out my local IP address. I only have 17 different interfaces on this particular computer for me to parse through. Why did I just type all of that? To be able to see what those happen to be. So I've got an IP address on here. Okay, it's 41. So let's say that I wanted to see the MAC address of my laptop. which I have on this computer, which is 10.1.10.41. Now, the way that you could see a list of MAC addresses that are on your local network is the ARP command. ARP-A specifically will show you a list of all of the IP addresses and their corresponding MAC addresses that are in your local ARP table. This is the cache of ARP information that has been gathered over the last 5 minutes. We've communicated to at least one of these devices over the last 5 minutes. Some of these are in here by default because they're things like multicast, but I've only really communicated to 2 devices in the last 5 minutes, 10.1.10.1 and the broadcast address, which of course is all Fs, all ones. Well, I have another device on my network that is 10.1.10.41. That's my laptop. I'm not even sure. I might even have the firewall turned on, so we're going to see how well this works. So what I want to do first, you'll notice that 10.1.10.41, not in my ARP cache because I haven't been talking to it. So let's ping it. That's a good way to put it into your ARP cache, because when you ping that device, it's going to need to find the MAC address. It will send an ARP asking, hey, you're out there and you're 10.1.10.41. Please let me know. Nope, I've got the firewall on that device. So it's not even going to be able to get to that particular host on my network. In fact, if we then do look at the ARP, we at least got a chance to see what the MAC address is, because the ARP process is not firewalled, but the IP process is. So ping won't work, but ARP always will, even if that firewall is there. So by simply pinging 10.1.10.41, which did not give us a response, we were still able to determine its MAC address. There's its physical address, DC A90492ECF3. So if we needed to confirm, is that really the device that's in front of us, we could always go to that device, look at its local MAC address. Does the MAC address on that device match what our ARP table says for that MAC address? That is incredibly useful to be able to have that there. The firewall that I'm referring to that I was not able to communicate to .41 because of a firewall is a personal firewall on this operating system. So those of you that the device I was actually pinging is this laptop that's right here. This laptop has a personal firewall turned on. It's the firewall in the Mac OS, and it will not allow the pings to communicate. Windows is the same way, to be able to have that. ARP-A you will use all the time, an incredibly useful tool to have all of that there. So if you're somebody who is working with devices, you're installing new network devices, you are troubleshooting if network devices are communicating to you, you're pinging it, it's not pinging, but is it not pinging because of a firewall, or is it not pinging because it really isn't even on the network? Well, ping it, then look at your ARP table. Did anything get filled in? Yes, the device must be there. So this ARP becomes incredibly useful. That layer 2 resolution becomes incredibly useful to have that there. So be familiar with those. Get very familiar with those. They're going to help you as you get into more of the functionalities of the operating systems. And if you're doing any type of network troubleshooting, that is going to help you a lot. So the 2 commands that I think fit into answering this question to display the MAC address of another network device, the first command would be a ping, or something else that would communicate to that device. It could be a telnet, it could be an SSH, it could be anything that tries to initiate a conversation with that IP address. So you need something to start with so that you can populate the ARP table. Then you want to look at the ARP table. So the really important part of this command is ARP-A. That is going to provide you with that extra piece of information you're looking for. Those are the 2 commands that you would need. And once you have those little secret commands in your back pocket, those will help you incredibly when you start working with other devices as well. Hopefully that's giving you some insight into some tips and tricks that you can use. The 2 commands that I used were the ping command. There's the ping command. This is the first one I used to be able to communicate to that device. And the second one I used was the ARP command, ARP-A, specifically to view that local ARP table. So both of these would work. Now on your test, you're probably just popped down to the command prompt, and now you have to go through the command prompt and run those commands to be able to do this. Not all of your commands, not all the questions you get on the performance-based questions will be this command type question, because there could be matching, there could be putting things in order, there could be a drag and drop, but you certainly could get a command like this at the command prompt that you would need to go through. So hopefully you're familiar with those. The ARP-A was the important one, and then anything before that would communicate is the right answer in this case. That is your performance-based question of the month. Let's now shift gears and look at some multiple choice-based questions and be able to use those. I've got another question here. It asks, which of the following would be the best way to prevent a rogue switch from having a lower bridge priority than an administratively configured switch? Which of the following would be the best way to prevent a rogue switch from having a lower bridge priority than an administratively configured switch? Would that be flood guard, spanning tree protocol, port security, root guard, or DHCP snooping? Would it be flood guard, spanning tree protocol, port security, root guard, or DHCP snooping? Think you know the answer? Log in your answer at professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We're going to figure it out and figure out all those pieces to have those there. This becomes pretty useful to have that. In the chat room, people are even saying, hey, there's other ways that you could get the MAC address. You could run this program. You could run this utility. You could run those things. You absolutely could. One of the things you'll often run into whenever you start working through these types of problems is that you're sometimes put in front of a computer that's not yours. And all those great little utilities that you always have available, I'll just run an Nmap scan. I'll run it with this particular script. I'll run another IP scanner that I have. And you try to do that, and suddenly you don't have access to that. It's not there and have those capabilities. So you really do have to have some way to do it locally on a machine that everything is right there and available to you. So see if you can figure out those pieces too. See if you happen to know this one. Which of the following would be the best way to prevent a rogue switch from having a lower bridge priority than an administratively configured switch? And have all of those there. Yeah, you could of course go to the device that has its MAC address and pull the network interface card out, or look at the network interface card tag that is on the motherboard, because it's probably an integrated NIC. That's how it always works with these things, isn't it? To have all of those there. So are you somebody who has done some protections of rogue switches having a lower bridge priority than others? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. We'll have to figure out if you have. We're going to find out right now, as a matter of fact, because I gave you some options. Is it flood guard, spanning tree protocol, port security, root guard, or DHCP snooping? This is a big problem, obviously. When you're configuring spanning tree, you want to be sure that you always know where the root is and where everything else is on the network. You want to be able to keep the configuration that you've designed for spanning tree. But if somebody happens to plug in a rogue switch and the bridge priority is lower than the switch you have currently configured, then it suddenly becomes the root. And this could create a number of problems. So one way that you can guard against someone doing this to the root is to have root guard. And 34% of you said, yep, that's how you would do it, is you would guard the root of the spanning tree. You're down at the root of the tree, making sure that nobody is a better root than what you are. That is the foundation of the tree, and having all those things there. 32% of you said spanning tree protocol, but in fact, something that is trying to have a lower bridge priority than something that is already there is already running spanning tree protocol. You're trying to prevent somebody from messing up your spanning tree protocol. So it would not be spanning tree protocol. We're looking for the best way to prevent rogue switches from messing up your currently existing spanning tree protocol. It would not be port security. Port security is useful to if you want to be sure that multiple people or a large number, a certain number of MAC addresses are not communicating through the same interface on a particular switch. So this would prevent somebody, for example, from unplugging an existing device and plugging in their own device. Port security would prevent that from happening. But that wouldn't necessarily prevent a rogue switch from having a lower bridge priority. I guess once you got past that point, it might, but that would not be the best way in the 5 different options that you had available. It is a way, but not the best way to be able to prevent that, because if you did circumvent port security, then you could still cause problems with spanning tree. Flood guard would prevent a device from sending more traffic than is acceptable on the network. And some rogue switch having a lower bridge priority is just a single BPDU packet. It's just one single piece of information flowing out over the network to make that happen. That's not a flood at all. That's the opposite of a flood, I guess, to have all of those things there. So whenever you start getting into those situations, you know it wouldn't be anything dealing with a flood because you don't have to flood the network to change the lower bridge, to change the bridge priority of a device. And DHCP snooping is useful if somebody is trying to put on a rogue DHCP server. It would not be useful for changing or preventing spanning tree from having any of those types of problems. The best way to prevent a rogue switch from doing anything relating to spanning tree, which is the BPDUs, the bridge protocol data units, is through root guard. And if you answered D, root guard, you got that absolutely correct. Root guard is one that you will need to know about. It is in the exam objective, so make sure you're familiar with this. The term root guard is a Cisco term. You know, a lot of people think that the CompTIA exams, they call them vendor neutral, and they think that means there will be nothing vendor related on them. But that's not what vendor neutral means. Vendor neutral means that they don't stick to one particular vendor. They can ask questions across a broad number of vendors. So you see Microsoft, and there's Linux, and there's Mac OS, and there's Cisco. There's all kinds of things in the CompTIA exams. So that's one where that root bridge becomes so important, and root guard will keep somebody from causing problems. You'll find out more about that on my N10-007 video, section 4.6, switch port protection, or I put a QR code on the screen so you can simply point your camera at that, and it'll take you right to the video for root guard. Might help you out as well. We did pretty good on that one. 38% of you, once I told you what the answer was, popped up to 38% root guard. We're going to go with the plurality there and say that is exactly the right answer. Well done with that one. Let's do another multiple choice question. I've got another one here. This question asks, if we go to the next one, which of the following measures the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling? Which of the following measures the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling? Is that a TDR? Is it a tone generator? Is it a light meter? Is it a loopback plug? Or is it a cable tester? Which of the following measures the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling? Is it a TDR, a tone generator, a light meter, a loopback plug, or a cable tester? You think you know the answer? Please don't answer in the chat room. You want to answer by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking in your answer. No hints in the chat room either. We'll do the hints after. But by then you already know what the answer is, so it's kind of useless to have the hints there. If you're someone who works a lot with cabling, you probably know this one. You've probably been in the situation where you needed to measure the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling. What did you use to be able to do that? You should see the answer in the list and being able to choose that. If you're somebody who's putting in a new configuration, maybe you're moving into a place where you had some existing cable in the wall, you want to be able to work with that, you do have to be able to do some of those. The twisted pair cabling and having those pieces there. This is one that if you work a lot with operating systems and you work a lot with servers and all of those pieces, you know, that's one where you really do run into times where you almost forget about the cabling piece of it. And you almost forget what tools you would need to use. But for Network Plus and networking in general becomes so useful to be able to work at that layer one, at that physical layer. You probably even have, if you're a networking person, you have a toolbox with all of these tools in it and then some. Because at any point in time, you're going to be on a site and suddenly there's going to be a question about the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling. And you're going to need to answer that question. Is this cable okay? Is this cable not okay? Because obviously everything starts and stops with that cable. So you have to make sure that it's working exactly the way you would expect. Let's see if the answer is what we expect. Which of the following measures the signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling? Is it a TDR, a tone generator, a light meter, a loopback plug, or a cable tester? 51% of you, we just got the majority there, said a TDR, whatever that is. 29% of you say it's a cable tester. 12% said a tone generator. And then single digits, 5% said a loopback plug and 2% said a light meter. Well, 51% said a TDR. TDR is a time domain reflectometer. And that is exactly what you would use to be able to get detailed statistics about how well a particular piece of copper, or in the case of an optical TDR, how well a piece of fiber is able to work. We have solid numbers that we can look at. What type of signal are we able to get from one end to the other? TDRs are great. They'll estimate a cable length. They'll be able to tell you if this cable has been spliced and how many feet down the line this cable has been spliced. Give you impedance information about the cable. Is the right kind of cable that we plugged in? We can see if there's any signal losses and how much signal we are losing from one end to the other. And this is where you would really certify this cable qualifies and has specifications that match that of a Category 5 cable, a Category 6 cable, whatever it happens to be. And then you can say, well, since we know this meets the requirements of a Category 5, we can run gigabit Ethernet over it. So that's what the value of a TDR is, to be able to have that functionality. It will also tell you if there are any breaks in the cable, how far down the line the breaks were, which is kind of nice. So you'll know, is it just behind this wall or is it somewhere on the other side? It will tell you either 3 feet down the line or 33 feet down the line. Here's where the problem occurred. That's a time domain reflectometer, or in the case of fiber, it's an OTDR, an optical time domain reflectometer. That is the right answer. The 53% of you now that answered TDR, that's the one that does measure signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling. Well done. 28% of you said it's a cable tester. Although cable tester, it's kind of a generic term, and I guess you could say grab the cable tester for me, and you really meant grab the TDR. It is not the best answer in all 5 of these. Cable testers tend to be very simple devices that tell you really nothing more than are the different pins of the cable connected to each side. That's it. They'll be able to give you some type of continuity test, and that is it. Cable testers don't go outside the scope. It at least would tell you pin 1's connected to pin 1 on the other side, pin 2's connected to pin 2 on the other side, or whatever, give you a wire map. But that's the extent of a cable tester. Cable testers don't tend to give you quantitative analysis of the quality of that cable. It won't tell you if there are any problems with the cable somewhere down the line. It won't tell you if there's been splices. It won't give you any of that information. So cable testers would not be the best choice to measure signal loss. All it can really tell you is are we able to talk to the other side at all? Is there any signal getting through, or is there no signal getting through? That's about the extent of a cable tester. That's not really a measurement of signal loss. That's really a 1 or a 0, isn't it? So that doesn't really count for what we want either. It would not be a tone generator. A tone generator is part of 2 different pieces you would use. One device that generates a tone, puts it onto the copper wire, and then you have an inductive probe that is able to sit outside the cable but hear that tone that's coming through. It's very useful for locating 2 ends of a cable, especially if those cables are very far apart from each other. You can put the tone generator in one room, and then you go into the big room where there's just huge amounts of cable coming in, and you can use that probe to move around to finally hear the tone generator. Some people do call it a fox and hound. That's exactly what you would use. That's the second half. I'm not sure if the tone generator is the fox or the hound. In that particular case, I guess maybe the hounds make a lot of noise, but it's the fox that we're looking for. It's one of those situations. I don't think it's that important. We've gone way too far with it already. 5% of you said loopback plug. Loopback plugs are very good to be able to run some tests, send information out of an interface, and have that information loop right back in, which tells you if that interface or adapter happens to be working properly. It does not measure signal loss across a length of twisted pair cabling, however. And then the light meter. In this particular case, light meter, very good for measuring the amount of light coming through on a fiber. That wasn't the question. This was about twisted pair cabling. There's exactly 0 light for those different pieces. So that's where you would run into those particular situations. The TDR is the best answer here. It's the one you should have chosen to have all of those there. That is the right one to go with. Let's see how we do with another multiple choice question. Let's keep this going. The next question on our list asks, a network technician is troubleshooting a problem with phone calls to a remote location. Which of the following ports would most likely be involved? Would that be TCP 443? Would it be TCP 5060? Would it be TCP 389? Would it be UDP 123? Or would it be TCP 3389? A network technician is troubleshooting a problem with phone calls to a remote location. Which of the following ports would most likely be involved? Would that be TCP 443? Would it be TCP 5060? Would it be TCP 389? Would it be UDP 123? Or would it be TCP 3389? All of those ports, by the way, part of your exam objectives. You should be able to go through this list, all 5 of those, and go, I know what that is, I know what that is, I know what that is. So if you don't recognize one, make a note of that. You want to go back and have a look through. And you may be able to do that in the chat room. Good point. You may be able to do a calculatus, eliminatus on this and be able to get rid of the ones you do know and at least narrow down the possibility of maybe guessing and getting it right. A very good strategy that works extremely well for your exam. Don't forget about that strategy. That's always a good one to be able to break that down. You might also be able to look at other questions on your exam, kind of giving away a little bit from my exam hacks book. Other questions on your exam may answer questions about port numbers. So if you don't know this one, maybe you could flag it, maybe guess, take your best guess, flag it, and then keep going. Maybe a question down the line might answer a previous question for you. Happens all the time, by the way. So make sure you're able to use that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asked, a network technician is troubleshooting a problem with phone calls to a remote location. Which of the following ports would most likely be involved? Would that be TCP 443, TCP 5060, TCP 389, UDP 123, or TCP 3389? How did we do? 54% of you, 53, just over half, said TCP 5060 is what we would be measuring, what we'd be looking at, how that's what we would be troubleshooting. But we have double digits, 20% of you said UDP 123, 10% of you said TCP 389, 13% of you said TCP 3389, and then 4% said TCP 443. Well, if we're talking about a phone call, then we've got to be talking about some type of voice over IP. That's what we're using these days for phone calls. So some type of voice over IP signaling. We know that the major types of voice over IP signaling are H.323 and SIP. And if we look at the list of port numbers that are available, we might notice that one of the port numbers that we would be working with is right here. That is your TCP 5060 and TCP 5061 are ports that you would use for the Session Initiation Protocol, or SIP. So this is one that if that, by the way, this signaling protocol, what this protocol is responsible for is when you type in the phone number and you press go, or you hit the last digit in the phone number, it sets up the call to the other side. It rings the other side. It waits for an answer. It returns information back to you. It makes sure that both sides are able to send information back and forth, and then it gets out of the way so you can have a phone call. And then when you hang up the phone or you tell the phone to hang up, then it sends another message to say, please disconnect that connection. That's what signaling is used for. That signaling is not the actual voice communication. There's an entirely different set of protocols. In fact, if you look at the suite of protocols that are used for a single voice over IP connection, there are a huge number of protocols in use. But the protocol that actually sends the voice communication back and forth, completely different protocol. It's an RTP protocol, real-time protocol, to be able to send that information back and forth. So you've got signaling that is a TCP protocol at the very beginning, and then it gets out of the way while you have the phone call. Maybe every once in a while during the call, it checks in, sends a message to the other side, maybe exchanges statistics on how well it's receiving the information so that both sides know how well the communication is going. And if it has to maybe move the quality down just a little bit to make sure that all the packets go through. If you've ever been listening to a call and suddenly it got a little worse, but you were able to hear everything the person was saying, that may have been one of the reasons for that. There's a lot that can happen with SIP. SIP is not just for voice over IP. It can do instant messaging and file transfers and video conferencing, but we often just think of SIP as voice over IP. There's so much more in the protocol, though, that it can ultimately do. These devices that we purchased, and stuck on our desk were supposed to be this amazing device that we would do our scheduling on this device. We would order pizza on this device. It was going to be this amazing device. And then we suddenly got these smartphones. And now the whole extra functionality of video conferencing and file transfers and apps that would run on your desk phone became less interesting. And we never really saw those happening. The answer in this particular case would either be TCP 5060 or TCP 5061. So 54% of you that chose B chose right on that one. TCP 443 is HTTPS. That's the Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. We've got TCP 389. So if you're doing some LDAP for lightweight directory access protocol, that's what you would be using. NTP, 19% of you said it would be UDP 123. That's used for the network time protocol. So it would not be used for that. That has nothing to do with voice over IP, but it does allow us to make sure that all of our clocks are set properly. And then the remote desktop protocol, RDP 3389, is what we were talking about, RDP earlier. That would be the port numbers used by that remote desktop to be able to do that. Very useful to have all of that. Those are the ports that you need to know about. That is just a small bit of the ports that you need to know for Network Plus. If you don't have the Network Plus exam objectives, make sure that you have all of those. Those port numbers are going to be incredibly important for you. And if you don't recognize any of these, make sure you make a note of that so that you can put them into your brain and have them there for the exam. Make sure you know more than just port number and protocol. Make sure you know what it's used for. That is probably the more important part. You will not get a trivia question on your exam that says, what port is used by SIP? You're not going to get one of those. You're going to get something more like this that is asking about a phone problem. So they want you to go through the steps of knowing what that is and understanding it. If you're trying to figure out where you might be able to get a consolidated list of everything that is on the exam, I've made one for you. I've gone through every single one of my videos. I've grabbed all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the tables, everything you would ever need for this exam, and I put them into one document. These are my N10-007 course notes. The course notes themselves are available in a PDF form. They're also available in a printed book form. It's exactly the same whether you get it in a printed book or in the PDF. The PDF's what I have here on my screen right now. And if we wanted to maybe look at some of these, let's look at, for instance, WAN termination. It takes us right to the page. And of course, we've got all of the charts, all of the graphics, all of the things you need to learn. So I understand you may not have time to go through 101 videos, 12 hours of content. You may instead want to have everything consolidated in one place, have it in an electronic form that you could put on all of your devices wherever you happen to be, have a book maybe that you can take with you. That's something that you can write in that's a little bit more detailed and or at least allow you to view it a little bit better. It's exactly the same information, exactly the same detail in it, but maybe it's easier for you to read that way. If you ever want to find this, it's on my website. It's professormesser.com/NPCN. That is the best place to go to get. That's the only place you can go to get this. It's not available on Amazon. It's not available on other sites. It's only available at professormesser.com. And if you use professormesser.com/NPCN for Network Plus course notes, you'll be able to purchase and download them immediately. If you buy the printed version, I will ship you the printed version. It costs a little bit more because it costs a little bit more to print it, but I will ship it to you. And while I'm shipping it to you, you can download the digital version immediately. You'll get the digital version for free if you get the physical version. And if you already have the digital version, you'd like to upgrade to the physical, just send me a note, open up a ticket, or send me a contact at the Contact Us link on my site, and I can do that as well. That's my Network Plus course notes. And thank you for all of you that have used these course notes. Every penny of this goes back to keeping all of this going. So I am eternally grateful. Thank you so much for your support. Let's do another question. We got some time for one more, at least one more. So let's do some more. Here we go. Next question asks, a network administrator is connecting two buildings 500 meters apart. Which of the following would be the best choice for this connection? Would it be a wireless access point? Would it be a firewall? Would it be a bridge? Would it be a media converter? Or would it be a router? Which of those would be the best choice for this connection? A network administrator is connecting two buildings 500 meters apart. Which of the following would be the best choice for this connection? A wireless access point, a firewall, a bridge, a media converter, a router. All five of those are good options, but which one would be the best choice? In fact, some of these could be used. I could use 2 or 3 of these, but that wasn't the question. The question was which of these would be the best choice to be able to use these. If you think you know the answer, please don't put an answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. And no hints on this one either. This one is maybe a little tricky. There's some of this that's tricky, but this is one where I could almost give you multiple answers here, or at least possible multiple answers with this one. But in this particular case, we absolutely want to be sure that we've got the right thing going on here. So feel free to have a look with all of these. It should be useful to and we'll probably break this down. Each one of these will break down and say why it would be good, why it would be bad, why it would be here, why it would not be here. We'll have to figure this out. And those. In the chat room, do I have an A+ textbook similar to the Network Plus? I have A+ course notes, just like the Network Plus course notes you just saw. I do have a Core 1 course notes and a Core 2 course notes available on my site. It's from the pull-down menus. You go to the A+ menu, and my course notes are listed right there. You'll find a link to them on the site. That's one where do you find this best choice for this connection? So I have to figure this out and try to break these down. If you're ever trying to even work through these questions, make sure you look at all of the answers, especially one that asks for the best choice. You can't just choose the first one you get to and say, well, it seems like the best one to me. We want the best from the available options. Sometimes the thing you're looking for isn't even in the options. So they give you this set of 4 or set of 5 or even set of 6 or 7, depending on the question, and they expect you to really know the answers to these. So make sure you read through every single one of them and then choose which one you think is the best. That would be really the whole point of doing this. In this particular question, we don't have a lot of detail. So it's another important part of every question on the exam. Don't read outside the scope of the question. Don't put other things into the question that were not there. Everything you need to be able to answer the question is in the question. They are never you'll never be in a situation where you will be expected to add your own information from the outside. A number of times you'll find people doing that. They'll say, well, yes, but what if this has already happened on the other side? We don't know what happened on the other side of this. We don't know anything more about this than what is in the question. Every question is a world unto itself. And for those of you in the chat room that have an answer that's not in the choices is completely common. In fact, very often the thing that is most obvious often becomes the thing that is just not even listed intentionally so that they can see, do you know what the second best would be given the options that are available on here? Let's see if you did know this one. A network administrator is connecting 2 buildings. They're 500 meters apart. Which of the following would be the best choice for this connection? Is it a wireless access point, a firewall, a bridge, a media converter, or a router? That's the one you want to go through, is figuring out all of those. And you chose, how did you do? Boom. Well, we're a little torn, aren't we? Exactly the point that I was making earlier. 37% of you said you would use a bridge. 31% of you said you would use a router. 20% of you said you would use a wireless access point. 11% said you would use a media converter. And 1% said that you would use a firewall. This is one of those cases where you really do have to look at the question itself to determine what are we trying to do. Now, for those of you familiar with Ethernet, you know that you could probably run a connection between these and have the capabilities there between these to be able to run 100 meters through copper. That would be certainly a choice. The other thing that you could do is run fiber. In fact, the answer that I would choose would be to run fiber. Sort of mentioning earlier that the thing you would choose probably most prevalently is not listed in the answers. So if you don't have fiber available, that's not one of your answers, what would be the next best choice for this? And the next best choice would be one that does not change any of the signal. We're not having to change any IP addressing. We just need to extend the connection 500 meters in a distance. And one of the best ways you can do that is with a media converter. be able to convert it. Don't change MAC addresses. Don't modify IP addresses. Just extend copper or even fiber over a very long distance. That's what you would want to be able to use. These are not without their disadvantages. Usually they are powered devices. That obviously is a disadvantage, especially when your power supply goes out. These are often relatively inexpensive devices. They're not made for, in most cases, not made to be have the longevity pieces of all of that. That's not the case either with this. It's not one that lasts for very long. There are some of these that are better than others, though. You will certainly find that particular case. But this is one where this is a little bit of a challenge, is how do you get that cable that far in the distance? Well, maybe multiple media converters, or convert the media to something that will go that distance, like put fiber on the other end of it. This is a media converter that converts between copper, plug copper in here, plug fiber into the other side, and now you're extending. This happens to be an older media converter that does 100 megabit, but it will extend that over the farther, longer distance with these. So that would be the best way to do it. Now, what about these others, though? Couldn't we use some of these others to make this happen? We probably could. Maybe another way to do it. Let's step through each one of these and figuring out the details of what these might be. So the first on our list is a wireless access point. Wireless access points are very good to be able to use with this. Wireless access points can certainly extend over long distances, but 500 meters, that's a long distance for a wireless access point. You probably have to get some very specialized antennas. Hopefully there's nothing in the way of having all of those things there. Hopefully you'll be able to make that distance. But of course, wireless access points have limitations as well with them. We have to make sure there's no other signals in the area that will be conflicting with that. That's one of those situations where it's not probably the best choice. There's probably going to be some type of intermittent connectivity. This is why we always tell people in their house, we tell them, oh, you're going to get on a conference call, make sure you plug into a wired connection. Even today, wireless connectivity, not the best when you're sitting next to the wireless access point. So that's probably a good example of why we would not want to choose that as our best choice for this connection. Could we make it work? Yes, we could. Is it the best choice given the other options? It is not. No, not the best choice. The other options we had available, things like a bridge, would be able to extend a connection from one side to the other. But a bridge is a relatively intelligent device. First, you have to find a bridge. Where are you going to find one of those? That's really a switch. So you're putting a switch in the middle of the connection between those two. That particular connection between those two, now you've got a whole switch there. It has to now, you've got operating systems running on the switch. You have versions of code you're going to have to update. It's probably a bigger device than the media converter, so that's not going to be your best choice. And then, of course, it is one that has to make a decision. Maybe it also has to participate in spanning tree. There's more complexity associated with that. So bridge would not be our best choice either. Router, talk about a bridge adding complexity, or router is adding even more complexity. Going to another site, are we going to need routing tables? Is it going to be dynamically routed? Are we going to have other choices available on this one? That is another one of those challenges where the router really is creating more problems than it helps. And of course, firewall, talk about complexity. That's really going to be one to have these here. Not really the case. The answer here, the best answer, is going to be a media converter. 11% of you said media converter. That's one that I think is probably going to help extend connectivity and have those capabilities there. This is one that is also going to help. Probably if they go between two buildings, there will be other equipment in the other building too. So of course it would be there, but why wouldn't you just extend the cable you already have? Simplify this. In fact, whenever you get in these situations where you're on something like a college campus, that's usually what they do. Just extend either a fiber all the way across or extend the copper connection all the way across with a media converter or a media, some type of media extension to be able to get to that other side, because it's much simpler now to deal with that extended link on the other side than it is to now have to deal with a switched connection, a routed connection, a firewalled connection. Really a useful thing. The 500 meters is the real key to this answer in being able to have all of those there. That is the real best answer for this one. It's one you might run into. If you had a lot of media converters, it probably looks something like this. Here's somebody that has set up a bunch. Maybe this is on a college campus where they have all these connections coming in and they're extending all of them across to other buildings or other places over these fiber connections. It's just a bunch of single rack mountable and chassis mountable media converters all lined up in a row. That's one that does help from a power connection because the power is on the back plane of this particular chassis and you don't have to have all those separate power connections there. Maybe there's even separate power supplies on the back of this. So there are cases where you can make this much more redundant if you're ever working through this. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit and you would like to be able to earn credit, a 1-hour webinar category CEU for this, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then this does not apply to you. But if you're somebody who's already certified, it certainly does. You would be able to do that by going to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link. Click that Contact Us link. On that Contact Us, put your name, put your email address, and in the subject line, put that this is the September 2020 Network Plus Study Group. And on a line all by itself, please put the words Media Converter. That is the words we would like to use. Those are the super secret code words of the month, Media Converter. You can then, on a separate line below it, put anything else you'd like in there. I read through all of these that you send me. So if there's anything else you'd like to put into that message, you can do it on that same one as well. I read through every single one of them. I'm not able to respond back to every single one of them, but I'm able to read through all of them at least. It takes me about a week to turn these around. You must follow those instructions to be able to earn the CEU. So make sure you follow those instructions to be able to do it. That's going to be important as well. So make sure you step through all of those steps and follow that. Media Converter is our super secret code word of the month. Let's do another question. We have time for one more, so let's squeeze another one in. This next question asks, a system administrator would like to perform a backup each night of the week. Which of the following would take the shortest amount of time to back up each night? Would it be incremental, cloud, full, image, or differential? A system administrator would like to perform a backup each night of the week. Which of the following would take the shortest amount of time to back up each night? Is it incremental, cloud, full, image, or differential? This is indeed a question you will find on other certification exams, but Network Plus as well. So you will find that there are questions that are duplicated across. Remember not to answer in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. This is probably something that might help that system administrator being able to do that. They would like to perform that backup, be able to work through all of those. See if you happen to know what they are. This is one that you have to kind of think about. You have to kind of know what those are and being able to step through each one of them. So try to go through each one, incremental, cloud, full, image, and differential. See if you can think about how they're used and being able to work through them and say, how can we get to a point where we are taking the shortest amount of time to back up each night? And see if you happen to know, being able to work through all of these. This is a question you will often get on your exams that will have, you'll see questions about this on A+, on Network Plus, on Security Plus. And if you're in a role where you're working with servers and operating systems, you're working with networks, you're working with security aspects, you have to know the nuances of the backup process. They're used in every single type of job you would have in IT. So if you're in charge of a database, you better know about the backups. If you're in charge of the network, you better understand how much of the network is going to be used during the backup. If you're in security, you absolutely need to know about the backups. That's one that's really going to help you because you may have to recover some information that got captured by the ransomware. It's no longer available. So let's go to the backups. Those are things that become important. Let's see how we did with this one. The question asked, a system administrator would like to perform a backup each night of the week. which of the following would take the shortest amount of time to back up each night? And would it be incremental, cloud, full, image, or differential? Let's see how we did. 52% of you said it's incremental would be the fastest each night. 34% of you said differential would be take the shortest amount of time to back up each night. Only 5% said cloud, only 8% said image, and 0% said full. So what would be the right answer? Well, the right answer is going to be an incremental backup. An incremental backup is only going to back up the things that have changed since the last incremental backup. So it's going to be one that really does give you the fastest backups every night. Obviously, the first night, everybody has to deal with a full backup. You at least at some point have to get a full backup, whether it's a differential backup, an incremental backup, a cloud-based backup, whatever it is, you have to at least get that full backup. The second night, now let's just back up what changed. Great. So if we back up everything on Monday in a full backup, on Tuesday, we just back up the things that changed between the backup on Monday and the backup on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we only back up the things that changed since the last incremental backup, and so on and so forth. Now, this means if you ever need to recover these, you have to put all of these things together and be able to have those capabilities there. That's one where you have to now have all of the incremental backups to piece it all together, because each one of them stands on its own. Each one of them is its own set that we now need to go back. And some of these may be changed multiple times. You may change something on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It gets backed up 3 times. So you have to also recover these things in order so that you now have the right backup, the right version of that file available once you're done with the restoration. Incremental backup was the right answer because that one is the one that would be fastest. It would not be differential because differential every night is going to back up since everything that was changed since the last full backup. So as you go longer and longer on time, you're getting a bigger and bigger and bigger backup each night. So differential even gets longer every night. It's certainly not the shortest time that you would have as compared to incremental. A cloud-based backup doesn't really describe the amount of information that you're backing up. A cloud backup really describes where you're backing up to. I guess you could argue that a backup like that is one that would indeed 7% said cloud, but a cloud backup would send it at least out to another site. We have no idea how long that would take, though. In fact, it might be a full backup every night, or it might be an incremental backup every night. We just don't know. So cloud would not be the best choice in this particular case. An image backup generally is taking the entire image, the entire everything on that computer, and creating it as an entire image. That's not a very short backup to be able to work with and being able to work through all of those. So that's not one you would run into either. And then a full backup, obviously, you're backing up everything. It's almost the same situation as an image backup to have those there. So that's not what you would run into either. That would not be the best choice. The one that fits best into the question, wanting to know the shortest time to back up each night, would be incremental. 52% of you got that one. Absolutely right. Well done with all of those. This is one, by the way, if you're trying to figure out where any of these questions come from, where I'm getting these port numbers, where all of these different topics are coming from, they come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have your hands on these objectives, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's a free document, and it tells you everything you need to know right now to be able to get access and understand what's going to be on the exam. They list everything. In fact, there's the list of all the port numbers right here on the screen. They give you every port number and every protocol you need to know for the exam. I've seen people show up with just tons of just pages and pages of port numbers. I'm going to say, well, you only need to know this list right there. It's in the objectives, along with everything else you need to know. Make sure you're familiar with everything on the objectives. There's a link to the exam objectives on my site at professormesser.com/objectives. You can also just go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. You'll find it straight away. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. I've got another one scheduled in October for the 14th. I've got a Security Plus study group for next week. So if you like this Network Plus study group, come back next week at this time. We'll do one for Security Plus. And of course, in October, on the 6th and 8th are A Plus study groups. The 14th is the Network Plus, and the 21st is the Security Plus study group for next month. If you're ever watching this and it's well past October and you want to know when is the next one, you can go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll be able to get that, know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Well, stick around. We're not done yet. We're done with the first part of the show where I ask you questions, but now we turn the boat around and now you get to ask me questions. Don't forget that you can learn all about our success bundle by going to professormesser.com/netsuccess. You can also, on that same page, find out about our course notes for Network Plus as well. Don't forget to follow us on the YouTube. One of the things you always hear people on YouTube mention is please subscribe, please hit the like button. The reason we say that is the nice people at YouTube are watching these things. So I have a person now that has been assigned to me on the YouTube side. I now have been talking with her about things happening on the YouTube side with the YouTube Learning and other products that they have, and being able to do more of these training videos and get them to you in a timely manner. You did be able to subscribe, do that on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about our weekly pop quiz questions for Network Plus. You'll find them at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Instagram. It's a great place to go too. Thanks for doing that. I've got questions coming up from the Network Plus Success Bundle, so stick around for that. We got plenty more to go through as well. Thanks for joining us in this first hour. Stick around for hour number 2. We'd love to have you back for that as well. We'll start that in just a few seconds. Thanks for being here, though, on our first part of our Network Plus study group. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Let's now, yes, you can ask questions directly in the chat room and be able to have this and have all of those pieces available. Yes, there's plenty that we can talk about. We'll talk about Security Plus and its impending retirement. I say impending, it's next year in July to have those there. Let me first dial into my own study group. That's the first part of the process that I have to go through, is I have to call into my own show. So let me do that real quick while you're sitting there. And then we will go through some of these questions that you have about all of these pieces. So, nope, I don't want to start my Sonos up. I want to go to my browser. There we go. Let's log in and bring up all of this. I will call into my own show, and then I will tell you how you can call into my show as well. I just have to get things started on my side so that it all works. And now the second part is where I call in. Thank you for bearing with me for just a moment. Get all of these pieces there. I will type in the super secret codes on my side.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
I'm going to do that. And when I do that, the nice lady will tell me,
welcome, Professor Messer.
Well, thank you. Thank you, nice lady, for welcoming me. That means that you are also welcome to call in. We have, if you're someone who would like to put a question in the chat room, I'm watching the questions go by. That's a great place to go to put a question in. So we'll, of course, have those available. You can also call in with a voice on the telephone. In the continental U.S., it's a toll-free number, 855-785-RJ45. West of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. It's a toll-free number, so it's free to call from anywhere in the continental U.S. If you're outside of the continental U.S., you can call in free using Skype. There's no Skype minutes required. So you can do a +1 at the beginning of this number because it's on Skype. +1 is the country code for the United States. +1, 855-785-7545. That's the number on your screen where you can call in via Skype and be able to ask questions there as well. So that might get you a little more details. For those of you that have purchased my Success Bundle, one of the advantages of having that ownership is that you're able to ask and get your question in first on the study group. And so we have a question from MT that asked a question that said, what's an easy way to remember which protocols belong to which layer of the OSI model? I feel like this is one of my weakest points in networking. I would love to figure this one out. This is one of those that it is kind of odd to work your head around when you're first learning about the OSI model, because it's a model. It doesn't exist in the real world. You can't go and figure out to where you can work on one. I need to go work on an OSI model. Can I borrow your OSI model? Because I want to figure this out. There isn't one. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. So that's the real challenge you have with the OSI model, is you have to figure out the details of the OSI model by kind of breaking down the details of the OSI model. And for those of you that have seen the OSI model before, it's these 7 layers of the physical data link network, transport, session, presentation, and application layers. And each one of those layers handles a different part of the network communication. For example, layer 1 is our physical layer. It handles getting an electrical signal between point A and point B, between a couple of devices. We know that layer 2 is our data link layer. It's in charge of getting MAC address frames back and forth between point A and point B across the network. We got the network layer. Layer 3 is the IP layer, TCP. And there's a set of protocols. In fact, there is a near infinite number of protocols that you could then see working at different layers of the OSI model. But you don't have to know all of those protocols, fortunately. There are a number of protocols that are useful to know. If you're dealing with an application, it's useful to know at the application layer you're dealing with HTTP. There's an application layer protocol. When you're dealing with something at layer 3, there's IP, which is really one major protocol. There's a few others in there that are sometimes useful to know. At the transport layers, TCP and UDP. That's kind of it. There's not much more that you would need to know at that layer. There are some there that sometimes can be useful, but for the purposes of the network plus exam objectives, there's not a lot of protocols you need to know broken out by OSI layer. That's not the level of detail they want you to know about. They will not be asking you a trivia question that says, at what layer of the OSI model would you find SSL? And then you have to figure out based on where it would be, okay, it's layer 6. You know, they're not going to give you trivia questions like that. In fact, they don't go a lot of detail into the OSI model other than getting an understanding of broadly how it is used, where you would see routing, where you would see switching, where you would see a media converter. That's the depth of what you would need to know for the exam. So for the purposes of what you're working on and trying to get the deal, the real breakdown of the deal for the exam, that is the real deal. That is knowing exactly what you need to know in the OSI model, because you could spend months researching protocols, listing out protocols, trying to memorize protocols, and breaking out all of those. If you ever get to that situation, that is not something you really want to run into. That would really make you crazy to try to remember all of those things. So thankfully, you do not have to. And at the end of the day, when we're using the OSI model, it's really to talk to other people to describe what we're seeing. Hey, I think I'm having a problem at layer 3. Can you take a look at that? They go, okay, well, that must be something related to the IP address configuration on that device. Let me go ahead and have a look at that. That's what we're saying when we're trying to break this down and having an understanding of that. So don't worry too much about protocols. Focus instead on learning more about what you need to know at each layer and how they work. And I think you'll be much better off in breaking those things down. Let's get some more questions. We're going to quickly go to the phones, and then we'll come back to some questions from the chat room. Let's first go to the 941. It's a Florida call. Hello, caller. Which name were you calling from?
Hey, good afternoon, Professor. My name is Sean. I'm actually in Tampa right now.
Hey, Sean.
From Hollywood, Florida.
Thanks for calling.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thanks for all this. So my question up in the chat as well, basically of subnetting. Or 7-second subnetting, which is great. If no one has checked that out yet, please do. That is awesome. It's better than any other way I've found. So I'm subnetting an address, 172.21.0.0 /28. My question is, with that, I was able to figure out 16 subnets and 14 usable hosts. However, I'm told that it really would be 4,096 subnets with 14 usable hosts per subnet. I see how they got it by basically using that third octet, but which one would be the right answer?
In this particular case, and we're going to see how well this works out for all of us. Those of you that are watching right now, you'll notice the lights have just gone out. We've just lost power here at the studio. I do have UPS, so I'm not sure. You still on the line, Sean?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So I still have a connection out. We are still powered to what we are doing from a battery-based UPS. If this stays here for another few moments, the larger generator will kick in just a moment, and we'll get the lights back on. So it'll be a really good test to see if this is here. One of the things you've noticed, and this is one that is important when you're breaking these things down, is whether you're working with the 7-second subnetting or any of the other subnetting that we're working on, is that it is absolutely going to be important for you to be able to really try to count the number of bits that you're working with. And that's why you got the odd number when you were working through that one. And I wish I could bring this up, but we can break it down. That'd be a good one for us to do as a separate session and kind of have all of those there. I think that would be a useful one to break through. Let me quickly, though, if I can get this back up and running. Well, we're going to see if we can get there. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get my lights back on in the current time frame, because now I've had a timeout on this. We're going to figure out if my power is going to kick back on. I'm not sure if my power came back on or not. I'm trying to listen in, and I don't hear it. Maybe it did come back on. Usually the generator kicks on after a certain amount of time that it is off, and looks like it is not on yet. So we'll have to figure those pieces out. Have all of those there. I just got a little bit of something there. Stand by for me if you would, just a moment, Sean. Then we'll break through where those numbers are coming from. Whenever I try to start, okay, system is booting, so there is power coming back on. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. Whenever we start subnetting more than an 8-bit byte, whenever we're doing more than those 8 bits, it really does start getting into very, very large numbers. And you'll notice in the 7-second video, I even do the binary math where I start going past those 8 bits, where we go the 9th bit and the 10th bit. They start adding up very, very quickly. You probably are not going to get a lot of questions on the exam, though, where where it's asking you to subnet out such a large distance. But the 7-second subnetting is the 7-second subnetting is designed to tell you of the subnet you're looking at, how many. What is the first IP address in the range? What's the last IP address in the range? And then lastly, what is the broadcast address? What is the network address? It doesn't go through the process of explaining to you how many separate networks could you make from that? How many separate devices in each of those networks would it be? You almost have to instead do the math sort of separately. You have to do every scenario and then write down what that scenario happens to be. So that is something that can happen on the exam if you're ever trying to break out and see how would you do all of that. That is the way the 7-second subnetting would be used, is that you would use that to just do multiple scenarios and then start breaking it out bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. I think pretty much every subnetting model does exactly the same way. You kind of have to make a /16 you were starting with?
Started with a /27.
Oh,
/27.
Oh, but you started with something else. You started with a 172.16.00.
Oh, that address. Yes, it was 172.21.00. Yes.
Okay, so it's probably a /16 you were starting with. And then now you have to kind of break down. Okay, let's do a /17, /18, /19, and sort of figure out from there what they happen to be. You'd have to then go through every single one of them. And then, there's that big chart I make at the bottom of the 7-second subnetting, where each time you do that, it now breaks it in half, and then breaks it in half, then breaks it in half again. So that's the part that really gets a little bit hectic, is now you have to do multiple 7-second subnetting steps to be able to figure out what each one of those happen to be. And then it almost becomes this difficult. As you do more subnetting down the line, it starts getting smaller and smaller. And now you have hundreds and even thousands of subnets that you would have to figure out based on that. At that point, 7-second subnetting becomes almost difficult to be able to work with when you're dealing with that number of bits. It almost is now you're going to have to memorize the size of the bits that you would have had to do from the beginning. So that is a place where 7-second subnetting doesn't work very well.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. But in your opinion, questions like that, asking the amount of subnets and large numbers like that, not on the test, not on the exam?
It's unusual to see that. They could ask anything. It's a subnetting question. It's certainly one that could happen, but they're not trying to create questions like that on the exam that use such large numbers that now you're not sure exactly what the calculation is. They're really more interested in saying, can you subnet this value? Can you tell me how many devices in this particular subnet? They're not looking to see, can you now count into the tens of thousands of subnets to be able to do this? They could, but that's not what they're focusing on.
That's good to know. Yeah, I try to do a little subnetting every morning just to get it down and I get these online and in forums and whatnot. And yeah, that one stumped me. So
you're doing exactly the right thing. The only thing I tell you is you might not get any subnetting questions on the exam. You might get one, or you might get maybe two. So although it's, of course, throughout your entire career, you'll be doing subnetting all the time, no matter what you're doing. If you're in networking and security and databases and servers and workstation, you're going to do subnetting at some degree. But I tell for anybody listening in, if you're struggling with this and it's just not working for you, and I've had people say, I've spent a week on subnetting. I say, don't do that. Spend a week on anything else. Spend a week on everything else on the exam and just forget about subnetting, because you might get one question. And now you've spent an entire week for what turned out to be one question. The good side of that, of course, is you're going to be able to use those skills throughout your entire career. So you might as well learn them now, because it's going to be useful to you going forward anyway.
Great. Thanks again, Professor. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sean. Best of luck. That's always a fun one to go through, is learning the subnetting. And then once you kind of get it, it starts to work. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's the 7-second method. There's the magic number method. There's the pie chart method. There's so many different ways. Find the one that works for you, which is what I say in my video on the 7-second subnetting. So another question that came up from the chat room, let me scroll up a little bit to have all of this here. The question was near the end there. We were talking about the Security Plus exam. I mentioned that the Security Plus exam, the SY0601, will cover a lot more material than the current one. Yes, about 50% more, a huge amount more material than the SY0501. So the question was, does that mean if you purchase a voucher before November, you'll be able to take the 501 at any point before it's retired in July? Generally, the vouchers are for an exam and not an exam number. So if you purchase a voucher for Security Plus, you can use that for the SY0501 or for the SY0601. There are some vouchers that are only for certain exam numbers. So make sure when you're purchasing the voucher that it clearly states what the voucher is for. Most vouchers are for either, but I've seen cases where a set of exams is coming up to the end and they'll have a set of vouchers just for the one that is retiring. So make sure you don't buy a voucher and then realize you can't use it for one of those. That becomes a little bit of a challenge to have all of that. The reason you don't have calculators on the exam is because you don't have calculators on your hand. That's the biggest reason. And when you're sitting in a room and you're talking about what your plans are to expand the network or the plans for a particular project that's being built out, you need to know quickly in your head how you're going to map out this network. What are the things you're going to do? When somebody says, here's your IP address and your default gateway, you need to be able to calculate immediately, is that IP address and default gateway on the same subnet? Maybe they are. Sometimes they're not. And then you can tell them, wait, you gave me a default gateway that's not actually on a network that I'm on, which happened to me when they first set up my cable modem back in the day, where everybody was statically IP addressed. And they gave me an IP address, a subnet mask, and default gateway, and said, here you go, configure these. I had to tell them, but wait, these are not on the same IP subnet. They said, what are you talking about? We don't understand subnetting. And I said, of course, that explains it. So that's one of those situations, being able to know those things. Let's go back to the phones. To the 512 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hi, my name is Luis. I'm from Austin, Texas.
Hey, Luis. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
First off, just want to thank you. You did your A+ back in 2018. I had no IT experience, and and bought your exams, did the study groups, your videos on YouTube, and did very well on the exam, passed it, and actually got my first help desk job from it. So thank you for your content.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
So my question is regarding VPN. I understand the concept about tunneling, but I'm not exactly sure what it does once it gets to the internet. So I understand the encryption process. I understand it creates a tunnel to get to another server or client or host. But what does it do in that tunnel? How does it skip some of the, from when I've done the path pings, I see that it doesn't show you the different hops it takes. So what's going on in that tunnel to be able to, so people don't see your traffic?
Well, there's a couple of things going on. There's of course sending the traffic through the network in a way that is protected through the tunnel and using some of the tunneling protocols to do that. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And the other piece is running the path ping or running a trace route. And you'll notice if you ever, sometimes you run a trace route, there will be certain IP addresses that just never show up. They end up as a bunch of asterisks on the screen, and they never get identified as what IP address happens to be at that hop. Those are two completely different things, and we'll kind of break down each one of those. Let's first talk about the tunneling part of this. And tunneling is nothing more than taking a particular envelope and sticking it inside another envelope. If you've ever had to send somebody, if you've ever received I had an employer once that had to send me a check. The check is normally sent to me or given to me in the office in an envelope because they don't want anybody to see what your check is. So they put that in an envelope and they just drop it on your desk. But I wasn't in the office. They needed to mail it to me. So they took an envelope and they put it inside a bigger envelope. And then they put my address on that and they shipped it to me that way. That's tunneling. They effectively took one piece of protected information, stuck it inside another envelope, and then sent that envelope out into the world, into the U.S. Postal Service. And that separate envelope that went through, when it got back to me, to my house, because that's what the address was on it, was to my house. Once it got to my house, I opened the one envelope, took the other envelope out of it, and then finally took the check out of that envelope. That is effectively tunneling in a very simplistic and straightforward way. That's exactly the way that tunneling operates. Now, as it's moving through the Postal Service, as it's moving across the internet, we can't see what's inside that envelope. In the particular case of the internet and a VPN, it's because it's all encrypted information. It's not that we couldn't see it. It's that if we looked at it at all, it just would be a bunch of gobbledygook. It would be just nonsense characters. We couldn't see. It's all in an encrypted form. It's in an encoded form, and it's not something anybody can recognize. And on the other end, instead of taking it out of the envelope, we simply decrypt it. That's the process we use on both sides. So there's this constant encrypting and decrypting that's going back and forth as we're sending this information from one side to the other on the internet, back and forth and back and forth. We encrypt it as it goes into the internet. We decrypt it when it comes out of the internet. That is a VPN, basically, as it's working. Well, that's whenever we start trying to figure out, now, how does it get from one end to the other? Oh, there it goes again. Whenever I try to get from one end to the other, we find that we are just sending it out via an IP address and hoping for the best. The IP address that we are sending out and having these things go out are really just saying between point A and point B, send it across the internet. Now, how that works out, where these things come from, that's the situation you're going to run into. Is it's up to however the routing works on your internet connection to make that really happen. So for those of you, by the way, that are on the phones, for those of you that are watching and wondering why are all the lights out, it's because we just had another power outage. For those of you also not familiar with what's going on in the southern United States, there's a hurricane coming through. So that's why you're seeing the lights go on and off and go on and off and go on and off. That's what we're dealing with. Let's talk about why we're not seeing some of these IP addresses, though, when you do a ping path, when you do a trace route. Some of these IP addresses just don't show up. And so let's do a trace route, and we'll be able to break these down. And I want to show you a good example of why we're not seeing some of these IP addresses. I'm going to get one going on my screen. And then let's do a trace route to, I don't know, one that might show us this. We'll do a couple of trace routes and we'll see what we get as we go through this. I'll bring this up so that those of you that are watching, we'll see if we can make this happen. And I'm still here in the dark. So here's a good trace route. I did a trace route to Google 8.8.8.8. And as it went through all of these routes, it has 10 routes here. You can see, in fact, some of them, it did multiple routers to get back and forth to that particular one, because it does 3 of these each time through. You can see there are 3 numbers here. Those 3 numbers are referring to the response time to a particular router along the way. Sometimes the router name is given along with the IP address if there happens to be a name in the DNS that it can do a reverse resolution to. Sometimes we don't have that reverse resolution, so just showing IP addresses. Every router along this path between me and the Google DNS server at 8.8.8.8 all responded back with a time to live exceeded message. That is the message that tells you your machine, hey, I timed out, my TTL went to 0. I'm gonna have to drop this packet. I'm just sending you a message saying that I have to drop this packet. So that's the thing that is giving us that IP address whenever we're seeing this back, is the router is sending us a message directly back saying, hey, I had to drop this. I thought I'd just let you know that I had to drop it, which is that's very nice of the router to do that. But not all routers are going to do that for us. For example, let's do a trace route to quad 9, 9.9.9.9. Almost put in too many 9s there. Does that go the whole way? Yes, it does. Let's do another one. Let's do a trace route to 4.4.4.4. So along that path, between me and 4.4.4.4, we finally hit a router that said, I'm not going to tell you what that route is. I'm not going to inform you that your packet got dropped. So it tries 3 times. Each time it goes through one of these paths, it tries 3 times. Then it extends the TTL, another one, and sends it out. So not only did the 7th router not send me a message back saying that it dropped my packet, the 8th router also sent me a message back saying that it had dropped my packet. And it will continue this until it gets to a router that either is able to make that happen, or if it finally gets to the end and it never is able to get a message back from a particular device, this may go on for a while. So that's the problem with traceroute, is eventually if that last device never informs you of this, then you're just going to keep extending it and extending it and extending it eventually to make that happen. But that is why whenever you start looking at a traceroute, there is a router there. It's routing. It's working just fine. It's getting your packet from point A to point B, but it's not ever going to send you back a message saying that it dropped your packet. That ICMP message that the time to live was exceeded is that specific ICMP message. And it will just go through this process until finally it decides, yeah, I'm over this. We can't do any more hops. We're done with it. In fact, we'll have 64 hops max before it finishes off for those. This is not uncommon, and it is in fact very common to run into this. I'm going to control C out of this so that we don't have that message on here anymore. This is where we run into problems, of course, is that you don't know at that point what route gets you between point A and point B, and you're not meant to know that. It's very common for many places to completely filter out all ICMP traffic, pings, ICMP redirects, ICMP source quench, ICMP time to live exceeded. All of those just get completely removed. So that's one of those situations that you might run into if you run a path ping or you run a trace route, is you're going to see that, and it's not going to be something you can help. On your own network that you are managing, you'll probably be able to do trace routes all day and not have a problem because it's your network. That type of traffic is allowed. But for something like going out to the internet, for instance, going to 4.4.4.4, which is another DNS server, there are some routes along the way between me and there that just will never tell me that information. So that is the kind of the short and long to those two pieces of it. The routers not responding to me are completely different and a separate issue than the VPN tunneling. But of course, if you're trying to figure out the path that your VPN takes to get from point A to point B, that doesn't help you very much. But it's one of those things where you're just never going to be able to see it, unfortunately. Does that make any sense, Luis?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I was under the impression that in that tunnel, the source and destination IPs were also being hidden. But what you said makes sense. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, thanks for calling. There's at some point when you start working with VPNs, there has to be at least an IP address on one side communicating to an IP address on the other. That may be different than the IP addresses that are inside the envelope that is being tunneled. But something has to be able to get it from point A to point B. For those of you watching live, you'll also notice that lights went out again. Nature of the beast today, at least we've made it this long, and I don't think, I don't have my stream health, my analytics up, but according to the stream information, we're still working. So we're going to go with that. I'm going to turn my lights back on, and we're going to hope for the best. Although this is cozy, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe it's kind of creepy now that I think about it. Not exactly the best view. Boy, what a difference, though, with the lights out. Where's the here's the lights out view. For those of you that have ever noticed, the lighting in here is so different when you cut back to me. Well, that's what it looks like when the lights are out, which is how it is normally. Normally, I don't have the lights on in here. Normally, though, when we're live, what a difference in having those here. There it is. I do usually keep the lights out whenever we're here. Let's see how the lights are in Orlando. Let's go to the 321 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you on mute, caller? The 321 area code. Caller. Maybe not. It could be me.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there, hello, caller. Thank you for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Meg, and I'm calling from the Space Coast, actually. So
321.
Totally
yes, you are.
Understand your power outages. Yes. But I just have to say, it is a really, really entertaining live stream. Watching the lights go out several times, and you didn't skip a beat. So, yeah, really, really interesting to watch your UPS system handle all that. So, yeah. And I just wanted to say that I passed the A+ exam, and I took your advice, and I did some home labs, like set up some Windows servers, learned domain, set up a Ubuntu, learned Bash. Really, really, really good. Kind of dove in headfirst over my head, but really learned a lot.
Great.
Did some troubleshooting. It was great. So what I wanted to ask, and I don't know if this is too complicated of a question, but it doesn't pertain to the test per se, but I want to do the same thing for my networking. And I was hoping that I could, I've heard that people can do like virtual routers and things like that. I don't have the money to go out and spend on like these Cisco routers.
Right.
So is there an alternative where I can, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's a very good point. And it's one that if you're working towards anything in routing, switching, or you just want to know more about Cisco, there are some perfectly useful, in fact, probably I find them preferable options than actually buying hardware. Now, let's sort of break this out because you mentioned this. I'm going to bring up eBay, which is, I don't know if this is something that's questionable to be able to do this, but we often somebody is working towards their Cisco certification. You've probably been out to eBay, and if you just search for Cisco Lab, you will find on eBay lots of people that are selling big bunches of hardware. It is the Cisco Lab. This one's designed for the CCNA and CCNP. It's got iOS 5.7, $379, $399. These are not inexpensive labs to be able to set up, but they do send you all the switches and routers and everything you need to do a basic setup of a Cisco routed configuration. And those are, if you're somebody who really wants the hardware and you want to be able to touch it, that is something that is useful. I will tell you, though, for the purposes of learning something like your CCNA, which is kind of the entry-level Cisco certification. I say entry-level. It's not an entry-level certification, but it's Cisco's first level of certifications. I think of it as a mid-level certification in the big scheme of things because it's not an easy exam to pass. But if you're somebody who's never touched a piece of hardware, you've never plugged in a cable before, maybe there is some use to that. However, I find that having a virtual environment available where I can simply drag and drop a router connect it virtually to another switch, connect that virtually to a workstation, click a button, and the network is up and running. Something I can put together in literally a matter of seconds is much preferable when I'm trying to learn. It's also, these environments that are virtualized are ones where you can freeze time and watch a packet as it goes across the network between devices to get a better idea of the traffic flows and what happens to be going on the network, which is really useful if you're trying to learn more about dynamic routing, trying to understand the nuances of spanning tree. That's what you want to be able to do. What you want to grab is from Cisco makes this technology available to you for free. You want Cisco's Packet Tracer. That is the network simulation tool that's available from Cisco. Absolutely free. You don't have to register on Cisco on their website. You want to be able to, there is a little course you have to take at the beginning of this that gives you just the beginnings of understanding what Packet Tracer can do for you. But I got to tell you, Packet Tracer is an incredibly powerful tool. This is not something that is a fundamental, basic, foundational tool. You can do some pretty complex designs in Packet Tracer, and you get to learn a lot because it has a near perfect emulation of a Cisco switch and Cisco router. So if you want to run the Cisco commands, you want to set them all up and connect these together and make them all work on your system, Packet Tracer is a great way to do it. They have Packet Tracer executables available for Windows and Linux and Mac OS. I think they used to have Linux. Do they still have Linux? I think they do. All those are available, and they're free just to download and work through. If you're trying to learn Network Plus and you're just kind of struggling, you had mentioned kind of going outside the scope a little bit so that you can understand what we talk about Linux, but what is Linux really? Let's use it a little bit. We talk about running these commands. Well, let's run them ourselves and see what happens. We can do the same thing for Network Plus. We talk a lot about spanning tree. Why don't we set up spanning tree and watch how it works and what commands you would use to view it? We talk about setting up dynamic routing. What if we did some dynamic routing? You can do all those things in Packet Tracer, and it's free. It's easy to set up. It works right out of the box. There's nothing extra you would need. You don't need additional software from somewhere. You don't need actual iOS software that if you don't have a router or switch, how are you supposed to get your hands on that anyway? It's all there in Packet Tracer, and that's what I usually recommend to people to be able to do that. And the fact that it's free also helps a whole lot, Megan.
Perfect. Okay, so just one other quick question about that. So you could hypothetically set up a whole network that looks like an enterprise level network and then go in there and do like the command line, the CLI, even though it's all virtualized. You don't need the actual equipment. You can do all of that right in there and experience that for yourself.
You can do every single bit of that in there, experience the entire thing, and then instantly, if you want to be able to change around the things that are there. If you're looking at it and thinking, well, I don't like this design, you're not going back to a closet and moving a bunch of cables around and changing, where things are plugged in. You're simply going to your screen and virtually picking up the cable and virtually dropping it in another place, and you're done. You're able to pop open a window that gives you full control to the CLI and be able to work with all the commands you would ever need to practically use for CCNA. All from that command line on your screen as if it was a real router that happened to be somewhere else in the world that you happen to be controlling.
Okay. Perfect, Professor. Thank you so much for that.
Best of luck. Good luck with that. And I think that'll be your next step. If you're doing anything past Network Plus and you're getting into Cisco, that'll be a good step into it anyway.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. For those of you who never used this before, it is a fantastic tool to be able to use. Let me see if I can remember my Cisco login. I do have it. I don't know why I say if I can remember it, because of course I can remember it, because everything is in 1Password. Let's see if I can copy it and remember my username. And I'm going to bring it up on my screen, and we're going to see if I haven't used this in quite some time. So we're going to see if it works. And I think I'm probably going to have to find my my Authy and authorize. I think I've two-factor set up here. Well, no, my password doesn't work anyway, so I won't be able to do that anyhow. But a nice idea. Some of the folks in the chat room are saying, but wait, instead of using Packet Tracer, let's use GNS3, which is an open source product that is not an emulator for Cisco. It really is using the Cisco code and running it. The problem with GNS3, of course, is first, it's not the easiest thing to get running, I will tell you. And secondly, GNS3, you have to have the actual iOS code to run in GNS3, which means you have to be licensed to properly use it. And there's your problem, is that if you don't have a switch or a router now, then you probably don't have a license to run the iOS software. So now what do you do? Now that doesn't help you either. So GNS3 is not it stumbles in a number of areas. If it was just a little bit easier to set up, and if there was an easier way to get your hands on, legitimately get your hands on iOS software to be able to run it, that would be a great thing. But for the vast majority of people listening to me, we don't have a lot of time to try to figure out a GNS3 configuration. And I've done it myself, and it is not the easiest thing in the world. And I don't have iOS. Actually, I do, because I have my own switches and routers, but most of us don't have iOS. Most people don't have a router and switch. That's the whole point of this, is we don't have those things. We want to have something virtual that we can use, kind of the balancing act of that. And by the way, there's practically everything you need in Packet Tracer. And the things that aren't in Packet Tracer, you can read about in a book and kind of see the idea behind it. It's not that there's the things that are missing are so bad. In fact, they've really, really improved it most recently and have those capabilities. Now, obviously, if you're going past CCNA, if you're doing something beyond the scope of CCNA, then you may need and require some hardware. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. But I don't think there's one single path for everybody. There's always advantages and disadvantages, and that's how we can focus on those as well. Back to phone calls. Thanks for holding for so long, caller from the 919 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Dennis. I'm calling from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hi, Dennis.
I just want to give you kudos, much kudos. I am 62 years old, and I've been doing this for a good long period of time. I actually acquired my Security Plus and my SYSA certifications and jumped over my Network Plus.
Nice.
And I can tell the whole world out there, when you think you know it all, you don't. Network Plus is kind of key to getting things done. And this is coming from a guy that actually was a product manager for Cisco's CCNA certification.
This is one of those things that I think anybody can kind of learn from, is that the computers don't really care how old you are. They don't really care how young you are. All they care is that you know what you're doing, and that, interestingly enough, that you're able to work with the other human beings around you. And it pretty much everything else kind of takes care of itself from there. Congratulations on your most recent certifications. That's outstanding.
Well, it's all because of you.
Well, I did the easy part, Dennis. You're the one who actually had to take the certification exams, but I was more than happy to help. I'm so glad to hear it.
Well, thank you again, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too. What a great story, too. If you're someone who is ever wondering, should I do this? Should I make the jump? Should I move from what I'm doing into IT? And I hear stories every week. People are sending me emails. They're leaving me messages. They're asking me questions about this, where people are moving into IT and they are in their 60s. They are going from one particular line of work that is very different and moving into IT. And there are challenges with that. There are struggles with this. It's not just about, do I know enough to pass the certs? There's all the other things around it. We've talked about this, I think, in the last study group. We talked a little bit about that, about how it's never any one thing. There's a mixture of things that go into doing something like that. And it's a challenge whenever you make that kind of move. But you know it's going to be tough. You know there's going to be sacrifices you have to make at the beginning. But as I've told people for years about information technology, is that there is absolutely no ceiling here. If you want to do anything with technology, there are jobs out there that will allow you to do that. Last week, we talked about in the study group about jobs I've had where they literally would put me on a plane at the beginning of the week. They would fly me around the world. I would stay in a hotel, wake up in the morning, go speak in front of a group of people. It could be a group of 10 people. It could be a group of 1,000. Then I head back to the airport, fly to another city, and talk to more people, and maybe go to some business meetings on the same while I'm there. As we'd go from place to place and talk to people, that was my job, was just talking to people about the technology. Other parts of my job where I'd fly around and I'd actually implement the technology, where I was doing the services work, where I was designing and implementing these technologies into the very large enterprise networks. Those types of things are out there and available. The scope is wide, it's very broad, and there's potential at every point along the way to do those types of things. So if you're someone who's ever thinking, does IT really have something to offer? It absolutely does. Whether that thing to offer is related to technology, it could be legal, it could be marketing, it could be project management, it could be product management. There's quite a scope available. So you need to figure out what makes sense for you and make that happen. Let's go back to the phones. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello, my name is Jane, and I'm calling from Lagos, Nigeria.
Hey, Jane. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for your content, and everything is actually really nice. I took my A+ for like 4 weeks ago, and I passed thanks to your content, amazing content. Okay, so I have a question that's kind of out of the scope, but it's related to IT too. And my question is, the thing is, I'm 14 years, and I'm planning to go into cybersecurity, ethical hacking, pen testing, and the likes. But I'm thinking that if I get all my certifications before 18 or when I'm 20, if I get into the working world, I'll be looked down upon because I didn't really have proper, work experience. Because I'm using labs, I'm using virtual machines so that I could just try and get my hands on a few things so that my knowledge I'm having now won't move out since I can't work. But do you think that I'll be looked down upon later on, I didn't get the proper experience I needed?
There's a couple of ways to approach this. And for those of you that are listening in that are sort of in the same boat, this is a common problem. It doesn't matter what country you're in, doesn't matter what your background is or what you're doing. There's always a place where you have to start in IT to be able to make this happen. One of the things that you're probably going to find, and it's this way in the United States, it's this way in other countries as well, is there's not a lot of entry-level positions in cybersecurity. There are some, but it is certainly not the larger scope of open positions that you might find in a more generic help desk, operating systems, workstation support, field services. There's many more jobs available along those lines, because what people tend to do is gain knowledge in operating systems, in networking, and then use that knowledge to be able to move into cybersecurity. So that's why a lot of people, I think, would like to start in cybersecurity, which I think that's a great idea. The problem, of course, is that there's not a lot of jobs in cybersecurity to make that happen. So what people tend to do is start on kind of a generic operating system, workstation, server support side, and then learn as much as you can about operating systems, learn as much as you can about networking, and then move into a cybersecurity role. And what you're doing, Jane, is exactly what you should be doing, which is you're not currently in those roles. You don't have access to those things, but you've got virtual machines. You've set up Linux. You've been working with these operating systems and these tools that are available, becoming familiar with Nmap, becoming familiar with the packet captures, being able to understand the networking side of things. Those are all skills that are valuable skills to bring to the table that you will eventually use when you get into networking and cybersecurity. But what I tell people over and over is there's things you can do to get into IT with no experience, to the point that I made a video that I released about a month ago, which is how to get a job in IT if you have no experience. And it's specific to IT, but it kind of applies across the board to almost any job. But it effectively says there's 4 elements you must have to get the best possible chance of getting that job in IT. The first is that you have some type of formal degree. Sometimes it's an IT related degree. Sometimes it isn't. My formal degree is business management. There was practically no technology associated with that degree. But that's a good example of someone who has a degree but can still work in the IT field. The other thing that I tell people is you need some industry certifications. That's the second element. Being able to have some CompTIA certifications, some Microsoft certifications, some Cisco certifications certainly helps during the job hunt, because many hiring managers like to see people who have those types of certs. The third one is to have some practical experience. And I realize that's difficult to get practical experience if you don't yet have a job in IT. In the video, I described some situations where you can get some practical experience. You can volunteer. If you can't volunteer, I recommend people do exactly what you did, which was set up a set of virtual machines, run your own lab at home. And in that video, I give you some different scenarios, some different labs you could set up that would give you stories that you can then tell someone when you walk into a job interview, where somebody says, tell me what you've done with networking. Tell me what you've done with security. And you could tell them how you set up your own firewall at home running pfSense, and it had a snort IPS configured with it. And you were able to find this traffic coming into your network, and you were able to find a machine that was infected, all because you had this technology running on your network. There's great stories there. And then the last thing I tell people is the one I think some of us forget about, which is know someone who already works at that company when you're trying to get that job in IT. It's remarkable how valuable it is to have someone you know, or just an acquaintance. It doesn't have to be a close personal friend, just somebody you met at a trade show. Maybe you met them at a user group meeting. Maybe you met them online and maybe you sent them a message on LinkedIn and said, I was looking over a job at your location. Can you tell me more about the position? And you have a conversation going back and forth with them. That's something you can then bring to the table. Go, oh yeah, well, I've spoken with this person in IT. We've had conversations about the job. Oh, well, you know that person? That helps also a lot. So those are the four elements I always tell people it's nice to have. I think you're doing exactly the right thing. You're putting together all of the pieces that can help you learn more about the technology. Build your own labs at home. Configure your own operating system lab, your own security lab, your own firewalls, your own intrusion prevention, and start setting up the filters and start looking at the log files and start setting up different rules. Build a couple of VPNs that you could run over that link. Set up an IPsec VPN between your location, your lab, and a lab that's running on Amazon Web Services out in the cloud. There's plenty of things that you can do to make that work. I think you're doing exactly what you should be doing. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but learning those skills and having that information that you can put in your pocket will help you throughout your entire career, every step along the way. No question, Jane.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. I appreciate the call. That's one we often forget, because it's more than just one thing. We often think we're just going to throw resumes out and hope for the best. Well, that's the least thing you could do. There's many, many, many more things that you can do to make that happen, and all of that. People in the chat room saying, I wish there was a list of this stuff that I'm talking about. Everything I just mentioned, and it's in my video. How to get a job in IT with no experience on the YouTube. Just search for that. It's on my YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. It's a 30-minute video that is chock full of information. There's things that people ask on this study group all the time, but I don't have 30 minutes to go through every aspect of it. So it is one of those where it has every single bit of that video is just information that you can use along those lines to be able to get you to that point. Back to the phones, 918 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? I hear me. You may want to put me on mute so you can hear me in the phone. Are you there, caller? I hear there's fumbling around there. Are you? You may want to mute your phone, because you can see there's a little bit of a delay associated with that. Are you there, caller?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, I wanted to start by saying thank you very much for your content.
You're very welcome.
I've been a longtime fan, and I did want to share something quick that I was one of your subscribers that did watch your video of how to get a job in IT with no experience, because I was scratching my head. I didn't know how. I actually reached out to an old youth pastor of mine, and he, over about a 6 or 7 month period, I was able to land a job managing a cell phone repair store.
Oh.
And within that time, my owner was also he was managing an IT account for these public schools. They had an issue where they were locked out of their switches, and I got them back in their switches. And now I'm about to assume that position for these public schools.
You just never know where this path is going to take between point A and point B, and the doors just sort of open up in front of you sometimes. That's a great story. And now the process of going from point A to point B to point C kind of took a couple of extra steps, knowing someone that was able to help at the very beginning kind of get you in there. How was it that you were working at the cell phone but still had a knowledge of working with these switches?
So I actually just had moved back to Oklahoma about a year and a half ago. And while I was there, I was going to high school and college at like a tech type of thing where I was going to college in the morning, taking cybersecurity courses at our community college. And I've always been interested in ethical hacking and computers and everything, so I've always been self-taught. But I did get that chance to go and have those classes. And I finished my first year and got my certificate from the college. And that's where I actually was introduced to your channel. Our professor had your channel up there explaining the concepts after we went over our whole objective for that day.
Great.
And so I'm just so hungry to get this experience and get these jobs. But I waited, and I had the patience, and when I reached out, it took me a while, and I had to do a lot of stuff for free, and I had to do a lot of stuff that was really hard. But I'm really glad that I got to get to the position where I am.
It's one of those things, I think, that we almost don't know the potential that's there until we sit down and go with it. It's a similar scenario that many of us have, is that we love the technology. We like working with it. We're just sponges. We want to know more about it. We put together these VMs. We see how it works. We kind of stick that knowledge in the back of our head, and we kind of go with it. It's kind of putting that, now how can I get a job with that? It's kind of the hardest part, and kind of finding your way through that path. It's one of those that once you finally do it, you realize, oh, okay, that's how we can use some of this knowledge. It's very, very valuable once you finally get to that point.
Yes, definitely. And I also think that it's you have to know, you have to realize when that moment is that you have to jump at your opportunity. And this specific situation, there was no talk about me going into a higher position, going into an IT position. He just happened to have this problem that I was helping, my mentor actually was helping him with the issue, and I helped them with the issue. And on my own free time, I was able to get back into the switches, and we got back into the network and was able to manage the network. And then right the day before that is when I asked my boss to send me to these schools so that I could help him out, because I knew I could help him out in a better way that I was helping him in the store.
Nice.
And so then the next day is when I proved to him, that, yeah, I got us back into these switches. I know I can help you in these schools better. And that's when he had my boss tell me to replace myself, get someone in here managing this store so that I can take the position up there and run the networks.
So is this primarily a network management position, working on switches, routers, and others, or is there a broader scope?
It's well, basically we have what the school wants is I don't know why I forgot his name. Not the principal, but the one above him, superintendent. He wants IT guy there at the school every day, and right now we don't have that. And so I'm going to be at the school every day taking care of not only the networks, but taking care of all the students and teachers, all of their IT needs, and everything on 5 different campuses. But they are also building 2 new campuses. And so we're going to have to build our team better, but I'm going to be starting off there by myself.
So it's a great story. I think it's also a great learning opportunity. One of the things I always found, because I managed a lot of accounts when I was working for the third-party manufacturers, is that I would go into many different schools, K through 12 and college campuses, and schools, it's its own set of challenges. Of course, it's the same switching and routing that anybody else does. It's similar technologies. It's the same type of switches. It's the same infrastructure and same commands you would type at the command line, but it's a completely different set of challenges. You've got not only technical challenges, you've got financial challenges, you've got a very interesting user community that is in itself a set of challenges. So there's so many different things to learn. I think it's a fantastic learning environment because you get access to so many different technologies that are that across the board that you'll be able to use that knowledge everywhere you go in your career. And if you get really good at managing K through 12 or college campuses, then that's a whole set of skills you can kind of take to any of those environments as well. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And one more thing before I go, I do want to say for the other people listening, like I personally, I do not have a high school diploma. I'm about to finish my GED. I don't have any industry certs, but my owner is about to pay for my cert because I haven't been in a financial situation to be able to pay for the cert, and now I am. And he's helping me out with that to invest in me. And it just shows that if you keep your head to it and if you keep your nose on the grindstone, you can accomplish it.
Fantastic. Fantastic story. Congratulations. Best of luck. It's all uphill from here. Now the fun starts. Congratulations on that. Best of luck.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing the rest of this stream. Thanks
so much. I appreciate the call. And what a great idea of doing this. I just finished saying that's one of the great things about IT in my mind is the opportunity, is the things to do. There's always somewhere else to go. There's always a higher level to move up. You'll never know everything, and there will always be something to strive for. And I think that's really one of the main reasons we created whatever this experiment is that has gotten out of the lab of putting all of these training materials online and saying to people, go get certified, go get that job, go get that better job. That's what we want people to do with this because the opportunity is there. And it's not only there so that you personally are happier with your life, which of course in and of itself is important, but IT is also a great place to become financially stable, to be able to do different things with your life. The technology is there just waiting for you to touch it. I just want to encourage people to go out and just give it a shot because once you start applying that and seeing the potential that is available, the sky really is the limit. And what a great story that was. Let's go to the 562 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Lance. I'm calling from California.
Thanks for calling, Lance. What can we do for you?
So I have a question for you. So I am going to school for cybersecurity, and I graduated college, and I found a technical school that gets me ready for certifications. And I basically failed the Network Plus I took yesterday, and I failed the A Plus, both of them. I was within 50 points of the network, or of the 50 points of the A Plus, and I was 84 off the network.
Did you take both of these yesterday?
No, I took. Last week I took test, which was both the A Plus exams, and then I had another test scheduled for the network on the 15th.
Okay, wow, that is a lot of testing in a very short period of time. I'm surprised. It's unfortunate that you didn't pass, but given the amount that you were doing in a short period of time, that's not too bad.
Yeah. The reason why, because I have a disability, and in order to get one test scheduled, it was ridiculous. It took like 2 months, and it all just happened to fall in where the only way I could take it was in that week or so. So I just said, just go for it. So I'm trying, because the school goes on to all the way up to the ethical hacker. So since I failed the first 3 certifications, I was wondering, do I keep on going, with the class and try to see if I could, find new study material and do practice tests that or do stuff like that, or should I keep going with the classes and then just and then go back and do the A+ Network Plus and get those, so where I could find a decent study habit or a decent way of passing those tests, and then take the more difficult certifications later on.
You were so close to getting the A+ and the Network Plus, and I guess this kind of goes back to what your point of doing this is. Some people get IT certifications just for their own personal knowledge, that they can learn what is required for that particular cert. Some people go through my entire course and never take the exam because they're really just trying to learn the content, and then they use that as they move through whatever they're doing. Having the certification itself is not something they're working towards. Other people really, really want that certification because they want to be able to use that to get a job or get a better job. A lot of hiring managers like to see that someone has that certification. And in the case of Security Plus, especially with the United States Department of Defense and some of the other federal government agencies, they actually require that you have at a bare minimum Security Plus. You could also get other certifications as well, but that's another one that they require you to have it. You don't have a choice. You have to have at least that particular cert. Yeah. So this kind of goes back to, I'll kind of turn the question back to you, is it seems a shame to go through all of that studying and get all of that done to not actually get the certification, especially considering the points that you were so close at getting that. It seems like a little bit more practice exam Q&A would get you over that hump, and you would have that certification. That continuing on seems like you would be losing the knowledge that you've been working on, and you wouldn't really have anything to show for it other than maybe later on getting a higher level cert, which I'm not sure is going to help you. Kind of goes back to the question, and maybe you know or don't know, is what do you want to do with these certifications, or what do you want to do with this knowledge?
I want to get into cybersecurity. I have had 2 internships in college. One was a help desk, and one was like doing DLP for a what was it, healthcare organization. Okay. And doing the DLPs and stuff like that really opened up my eyes, and like, oh, I really like forensic stuff and like that. Yeah. But I also want to do pen testing as well. So that's why I was trying to get these certifications to understand and try to get me in like to a pen test position or entry level position or a data or network analyst position. Okay. This is one where the type of positions that we see in IT security, penetration testing, somebody who is a red team, blue team type person is one that's going to have they need some type of foundational knowledge to be able to have those roles. So you can't just walk off the street and do penetration tests because there's so much involved underneath the surface. You have to have an understanding of operating systems, of the network itself, of vulnerabilities, of how the exploits take advantage of those, and be able to put together some pretty decent skills to be able to have that there. But one of the things that I think that people sort of want to be able to do, and I understand completely, I'd love to jump right into one of those high-end pen testing roles. It's just that those types of jobs themselves are rare. And then on top of that, the things they expect you to know to get that particular type of job requires quite a bit of knowledge of the industry and some hands-on time, some stick time, some experience time with operating systems, with networks. You need the foundation before you can jump into those types of roles. I would highly recommend you look at, and I think you're on the right track, getting that network role, getting the network administrator, network analyst, network troubleshooting role is a great one to jump into. You have some practical experience on the data loss prevention side. It would be great to roll that into the networking side because, as I've told people over and over, if you're looking to get into that IT security, that blue, red, purple side of things, you really, really need to have a strong, solid, almost expert foundation in networking. So the more you can learn about switching, routing, and all of the technologies around switching and routing, the better
security professional you're going to be on the other side. And it's going to help you get that job in IT security because they're also looking for people that have that solid, well-honed understanding on the network side.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is start studying for the network again and retake it and pass that and then keep on going on?
I think at a minimum, Network Plus is a fantastic place to start. If you really want to get into a network analyst role, maybe start with Network Plus, roll that knowledge into the CCNA, and that's a perfect 1-2 punch that kind of rolls you, kind of starts you into what you need to know with CCNA. But now that you've got Network Plus under your belt, you can really focus on the Cisco side of things with the CCNA, because now it's a ton of Cisco on the CCNA. It's kind of a very different exam than it used to be. That's the place I would probably recommend you start with. Do you necessarily have to do the A+ to be able to get in that networking role? Not necessarily, but having some knowledge of the operating system and understanding Linux, Microsoft Windows, and how they work at the network level will help you in the networking role as well. So you really can't go wrong.
Okay. So the next class is the CCNA. So what I'm thinking of doing is I'm not going to be able to get the test scheduled anyway for 3-6 months or whatever. So I'm thinking of probably purchasing your courses on the network and study that as well as I'm studying for what my college provides me, and then taking it from there.
I think that's a good mix, and it's going to give you the CCNA knowledge. It's going to help you get into the roles you would like to be in, and you're going to get the foundational knowledge on the network side that will help you pass the CCNA. You can kind of get past all the Network Plus stuff so that when you're finally focusing on the Cisco pieces, you can deal with understanding the command lines, the setups, understanding how to recover the switches, how to set up the dynamic routing, plus all the other pieces that they have. And they have a little bit of DevOps thrown in there that go well beyond the scope of Network Plus. So if you already have the Network Plus down, that will help you when you finally get to CCNA.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Okay. And I'll okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate the call. That's one that I think can also help others too. If you're ever trying to figure out where I go to get that job, there's usually a path. Usually don't jump into a pen test job. Usually it's an upward steps that you go. You start here, then you take the next step, then you take the next step, then finally you can qualify for something like pen test. From the chat room, people are asking about some of those labs I mentioned. For instance, I document those all in my video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. I give you, I think, 3 different lab scenarios that go through, one with operating systems, one with networking, and one with security. So I give you some ideas that you can work through. I think all of those work together and have all of those there. I think that the operating system one for Microsoft was focused on building out an Active Directory server and having Active Directory available and working with that. The one with networking and security was more of the pfSense and Snort and working with those. And I think from an operating system Linux side was just getting a Linux VM running and loading up a web server, loading up a database server, getting WordPress installed, setting up your own web server with its own content management system and understanding those pieces. So there's things you can do with that. Plenty of labs that you can go with from there, I assure you. I have nothing but labs that I do here. Speaking of WordPress, let's go back to the phones. The 765 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Are you there? I'm on mute. Am I muted, caller 765? Let me check and make sure I've got you turned up there. Are you there, caller? You've been holding for so long. I don't want to hang up the phone. I want to just say, are you there, caller, over and over again until you happen to pick up, because I have you potted up. You're up at a decent volume, and I'm just not hearing you. So I'm going to return you to the queue, as they say. We'll stick you in there, and we'll see what happens from there. In the meantime, we'll go to the 714 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Matthew, and I'm from Garden Grove, California currently, but I'm relocating back to Seattle very, very soon.
Oh, this is what's happening in California. Thanks for calling, Matthew. What can we do for you?
Well, I just want to actually give you a big thanks. I appreciate the format that you present everything. simple and thorough at the same time. And it's whenever I get anybody who asks me how to go about chasing any kind of IT or anything like that, I always point them to you first.
I
say
appreciate
this
that.
is it's the free, most thorough option in my opinion. The short version of my career is I got my computer science degree like 12 years ago, and I wanted to be a developer. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I don't like that. It turned out it was not the jam. I didn't want anything to do with it at all.
Feel ya.
And actually I used to work at video game companies. And so, it was, they say you should do what you love and that sort of thing. But what I realized was I liked, my comparison is kind of like in F1 racing. You have a driver and then you have the engineers, right? So I like working on the engines. I don't want to race the car. So for me, that's kind of how I took everything. And when I realized that there's a big gap in between like a computer science degree doesn't mean you're good at writing code. It means you went to school for 4 years, you learned about computer science, you passed your classes, but you only take a little dip in all of those different languages, but you're not necessarily good at them unless you practice them.
Yeah.
So that's where I was always finding gaps with talent. Me, I was always very driven to like learn and learn and learn and learn. So I was always good at it, but I didn't like the job. Then I stumbled into the CompTIA and all these other cert universes. And what I like about it is you know what you're getting out of it, and you know what you expect of either candidates or even yourself if they're going to ask you questions on an interview and such. So I find it thorough and fair comparatively to getting a degree and then someone has expectations, but you may never have even stumbled into the class to get that far.
It's fair.
So I guess for anybody who, in my opinion, I guess anybody who's kind of wondering, like, should you do this, that, or the other, what you should get, you could go any route about this, but I like certification, and one of the best things you can do with a certification is strong arm your way into a job, see what everyone else is doing there, and then say, hey, how do I do what you're doing? And they'll tell you most of the time. They'll give you the route.
That describes my career pretty much. You get in and you realize, well, there's something shiny over there. What are they doing? Tell me more about that. You suddenly find yourself interested in and directed towards a particular set. And you kind of realize later, well, that's because that was something that really, really interested me. That's why I kept spending so much time over there. And then you end up doing that as part of your career. It's not an uncommon story.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, there's a handful of you guys that I think are doing a really, really sweet justice to the IT world. And also for people who may have, like, I don't know, have inhibitions about even chasing an IT job because it deals with computers and you may not have spent your entire time in it. And I was very blessed. My old man worked at IBM when I was a kid, so I literally have a picture of me when I'm 3 years old sitting in front of a computer running a command line to get my games to run. But that does not mean that I'm a command line guru god. There are 1,000 people who are way better than me. But it was just, I feel, so it's easy for me to express to somebody. It's not hard, but it's a different skill to be able to explain it. And I appreciate, like I say, what you do because you explain it in a format that anybody can get. And so I just, like I said, I wanted to give you more a commending job because I think you're doing a phenomenal, it's very ethically profound what you're doing because you're not trying to take a bunch of dollars from people in order to get them in the door. So thank you.
If there were more games at the command line, I'd be much better at the command line, Matthew.
There's no doubt about that. Oh, and the other guy who was talking about the CCNA, the only thing I would say about it, the CCNA will get your hands in the CLI and you can get dirty with commands and actually configurations. Because it's one thing to sit there and watch somebody explain to you how all that kind of stuff works, but when you have a router, a switch, and those sort of things in your hand and you just smash them together and you see what's going on, it's a way better feel. Those commands, they look scary. They're not. They're really not. And the tab key is your best friend. So.
That is absolutely true. Boy, that is a life skill, the tab key.
Yeah, so absolutely. I appreciate. Oh, my final question. Security Plus changes in November. Do you think I should, if I was somebody who was going to do the new one, should I get the new one or should I just chase this old one real quick?
This is the question that comes up every time there is something that changes with one of these exams, and they change every 3.5 years or so, every 3 years or so. There are significant differences between the SY0501, the current version of the exam, and the SY0601 that is due to be released in November. The SY0501 doesn't go away, of course, until July of 2021. So there's a huge ramp. She's plenty of time to take the 501. I have done a complete analysis of the 501 and 601 exam objectives. I have compared what is new. I have compared what has been dropped. I have looked at the statistics for both of them. And of course, I made a video of it. There, it's on my channel, which is why you should not wait to take the 601 exam. You should instead take the 501 until you can't possibly take it anymore. The 601 has probably 50% more exam objectives. They dropped about half of the objectives off the 501 and added a huge number of additional ones to the 601. 601, no question, is a much bigger exam with much more that you have to know to be able to pass it. It changes a little bit in its scope, but it will be much easier to take the 501 because even though the 601 is due out in November, it takes time to make videos. It takes time to write books. It takes time to publish questions and answers. There's not going to be a lot of study materials available for the 601 even in November. So statistically, your best bet is to go with the 501, not only because there's more tools available and more study materials available, it's going to be a little bit easier to get your cert. And whether you take the 601 or 501 and pass it, you earn exactly the same certification. There's literally no difference between the Security Plus cert that you earn regardless of what exam you take. So it makes sense to me to take the 501. There will always be people that say, I don't care, I want to take the 601. And I mentioned that in my video and I explain why they're wrong. But I also explain that ultimately it's the same certification anyway, and I can't stop you.
Yeah, no, I just was trying to make sure there wasn't but if you take the CNA, which the new one compared to the old one, like the DevOps deployments and all that stuff, there's a huge discrepancy in differences in technology.
Yeah.
And so I just wouldn't want to be the guy, who was like, yeah, go take the 501, guys. It's totally fine. But it turns out it's old and crusty and dusty. But if it's not, we're good then.
It is not old. It's not crusty. Things have not changed the technology along those lines. What CompTIA, I think, decided is that there needed to be a lot more content in it. So they added a lot more things that you have to know. There's literally 50% of the exam is new. That's a huge number, but the 50% that is left there is almost all of the old 501 exam. They didn't really drop a ton of things off the bottom of that exam. What they did drop is having to know trivia about every hashing algorithm in the world. So they don't ask you the 5 different hashing algorithms and all of the different block encryption methods and all of the different symmetric encryption methods and all the asymmetric. They just want you to know what's asymmetric, what is symmetric, what is block. They don't ask you to go through all of those trivia questions anymore, but everything else is still in there. Now you just have to know more. You have to know twice as much now. So that's the big difference. They're just adding on to some of the things that are newer in the industry, and the things they're not so new that you're not going to run into them anyway once you get Security Plus certified. So I say stick with the 501 until the last possible minute. I think it gives you the best chance for earning the certification, and you lose nothing by doing that.
Awesome.
Appreciate
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for letting me eat up a lot of your time. I really appreciate it, dude.
Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate the call. That's always a good question, though, is how do you know which exam to take? It is a question I always get, which is why I made a video of it, because I kept there's all these emails I get. I get multiple emails every day. Which one should I take? And now that I made a video from it, I can just point people over to that video. Here's why I think you should take the 501 as long as you possibly can. And I break it out for you to really understand. Here's the total number. Here's the differences. I did a complete analysis of it. I broke it down to its nth degree, and a degree you will never, ever need to know, but I do because I'm putting together the certification. So I have tons of spreadsheets on here's what's new, here's what's old, here's what's in both of them, here's what's in neither of them. That's something that is all broken down in my views of this, but I didn't put that all into the video. I just collapsed it all down and said, here's the total number, so that you can get an understanding of why I say that. And I leave it up to you to make that final determination on, do you really want to take, after knowing all of that, and knowing that it's going to be much harder to memorize, there's going to be a lot more content to know, there's going to be fewer exam materials available out of the gate, you can still take the 601. That's completely up to you. But I like that you will be educated on it, that you'll know this prior to going into it, because I would hate for you to go through the entire process of a very difficult learning schedule to learn that 601 material when the 501 material is right here and it's much easier and you earn the same thing at the end of the day. That's kind of the situation you're in. Now, there may be some employer out there in the world that understands that there are differences between the exam versions, and there might be somewhere between now and July an employer that says, I don't want you to take the 501 exam, I want you to take the 601 exam, because maybe they think it is better. Maybe they feel that's the newer one, and there's valid reasons for thinking that, I think. I haven't found any like that yet. There is someone who was in my chat room yesterday that did say, I'm at the school and the school says we have to take the 601 and not the 501. And I said, why is that? They go, I don't know. So I said, well, go find out. I want to know why they think that's important. So maybe there is someone out there that does think that's important. I think it will be much harder to do. The main goal for many of us is to get that job or get a better job. And just being Security Plus certified is an important piece of that, especially if you're working for the U.S. federal government, Department of Defense. As I mentioned, Security Plus is a core minimum. The government doesn't care which exam you take. They only want to see that you're Security Plus certified. So in that particular case, when your end goal is just to have the credential, the 501 makes sense. For some of us, and I totally get what Matthew was saying, and I agree completely, sometimes you want to learn the latest stuff. It's really important to you as an IT professional that you really understand the latest and greatest, so you're going to go learn the 601 materials. Absolutely understand that. Rock on. Just know that it's going to be a little harder than the 501, but that may be okay with you because you feel like there's a better end goal for you personally to take the 601. So that's the balance act. That's why I made the video. So you can make that determination, but you need to understand what the differences really are. In the past, there have been changes to the certifications that have been a 20% difference. But this one's big. It's a 50% difference. I should also tell you, and this is probably an important consideration too, if you're planning to take the 601 exam, make sure you study from 601 materials. If you're planning to take the 501 exam, make sure you study from 501 materials. Do not mix and match those. You will be so sad when you take the certification if you've mixed and matched those because they do not mix very well. There is so much material that's different on both of them that you do not want to do that. So very important. And remember, as soon as you pass, you're certified for 3 years. Doesn't matter which exam you took, you're certified for 3 years. So that's the important part too. That's all in the video. It's on my YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube, why you should not wait for the 601 exam. Get your 501 right now. Plus, the 601 comes out in November. As we're recording this, this is the middle of September. It's a long time until November. Get your certification now. Get it in your pocket. It doesn't do you any good waiting. You need that cert to put on your resume right now. There's a lot of value having it in your pocket. So that's another reason I mentioned don't wait. Don't wait like, oh, just wait for the new one. Do not wait for the new one. That is not your highest percentage passing goal right there, is waiting for the new one. So hopefully you can get a feel of that as you go through. Let's go back to the phones. The 901 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Henry.
Hello, Henry. What can we do for you?
Memphis.
Henry in Memphis.
I had got an interest in the IT, so I got my GED and got into class, and I started studying for the A+. That was 901, 902, and I went on a kind of pushed myself, and I thought I was ready, so I went and did the test, and I missed it by 10 points. And just I was about to retake it, I had an accident and put me out of school, and when I was able to restart, I saw they had changed, there was a new, I think it's, what's the new, new testing now, and they say some new things were added. So I did what I did Network Plus. I passed that, and start doing the Security Plus. And so let me go on and do this test, but I missed that by 80 points. So I was wondering how difficult is it for the A Plus now, the new one that they have, because it switched, right?
It did. Now it's the 221,001 and 221,002. It is a newer version than the 900 series that you learned. Fortunately, the difference in exam objectives between the 900 series and the 1000 series is 20% of the exam is new, 20. So 22% of the exam is updated, which is not a huge amount. It's not an overwhelming amount of new content, but you will have to get books and study materials that are for the 221,001 and the 221,002 so that you can get your hands on that 20%. That 20% is enough to fail an exam. So you do have to make sure you get the right materials to be able to do that. So that's why I think it's if you've already been through the 900 series, you are very close to passing the 900 series. I think it will be very easy for you to get the 1000 series materials, jump into those. You already know Windows 7. You already know Windows Vista. Well, Windows Vista is not on there, but Windows 7 was on the 900 series. You already know 7. So because you already know Windows 7, you kind of already know Windows 8, 8.1, and in some ways you already know Windows 10 as well. There's not a lot of differences between those three operating systems. So some of the new features in Windows 10 are nice to know about. The reset features, the restart, the reload features. Those things are also valuable. So you're going to have to learn those. But as I mentioned, it's only 20%. I think it'd be pretty easier for you to jump into the new A+ and be able to get those new topics down, especially considering how much knowledge you already have in the 900 series, Henry.
Okay. I appreciate you, and thanks for all the good work you're doing.
Thanks, Henry. I appreciate the call. Best of luck. I think you're doing the right thing, too. I think going down that road of circling back to the A+, getting the fundamentals down, because you were so close with the 900 series, why not jump into the 1000? Back to the phones. It'll go beep, 765 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, can you hear me this time?
We can hear you this time. Thanks for calling.
Okay. I'm Evan. I'm from Indiana, but I'm currently up here working in Minnesota. I took my A+ a long time ago, back when I started in IT. And I believe it's it's definitely the unlimited one where there's no time limit or expiration on it.
Okay.
And I'm currently in the process of studying for my Network Plus. And I'm looking to get more into the networking sysadmin side of things. Do you think there's any reason I should go back and do the new A+ if I already have the license
for
the existing license for A+, and I'm going more into Network Plus and Security Plus?
For the people that aren't aware of this, there's some of us that haven't been around the A+ for very long. Back in 2011, CompTIA changed how their certifications were licensed. When you earned your A+ certification, your Network Plus or your Security Plus prior to 2011, it was a good for life certification. You'll often see it written as a GFL, good for life, which meant it did not need to be renewed. Well, according to the International Standards Organization, these ISO standards that are used around the world, and these ISO standards are used for things like federal government use, the ISO standard said IT certifications should be renewed occasionally. So CompTIA, to be able to comply with those standards and meet the requirements of primarily the U.S. federal government, but ISO in general, said, all right, we'll do this on a 3-year rolling basis. You need to renew your certification every 3 years to be able to maintain the certification. But if you already have your GFL, you're going to be good for life. You don't have to renew that one. Now, what employers have realized is that having a certification from 2011 where you're very knowledgeable on Windows NT probably does not help you very much with Windows 10. So they realize that, yeah, you're probably going to need to get a newer certification if you want to get into that type of job. But if you're looking to get a job in networking, having the A+ certification is probably not going to be a priority for the hiring manager. They're going to want to see you have some type of networking knowledge. So something like Network Plus, or perhaps even better, the CCNA, because that really shows a network administrator manager that you really understand the nuances of configuring a switch or a router, or at least what you should be doing at a command line on those particular devices. And as I mentioned earlier, having the knowledge of Network Plus is a good stepping stone into CCNA, but what you'll find is there's a good bit of overlap between those two, that even if you started with CCNA, you'd have to kind of go back and learn those things anyway. So there is an argument to be made for skipping over Network Plus even in that scenario. I don't think, to answer your question, I don't think going back and renewing or updating A+ materials will be useful at all. I think your focus, if you want to get into networking, your focus should be in Network Plus and probably ideally on the Cisco certifications.
Okay. In my current position, I'm essentially a technical support specialist. But since there's only 3 of us in the company, essentially almost all of my duties are shared with the other 2 guys. And currently, I'm the most experienced when it comes to networking, and I already have my voucher and stuff like that for Network Plus, so I'm going to take that anyway.
Great.
But so you would look into CCNA after Network Plus.
I would.
Not necessarily go from Network Plus to Security Plus first.
If you were interested in getting into a network operations center role, one that was more of the help desk for networking, then probably only Network Plus would be a good place to go. But you said, I want to get into some networking stuff. I want to manage switches. I want to manage routers. If you really want to move up in the area of networking, the Cisco certifications are absolutely the way to go. I think Network Plus is a good place to start with that, because there's a huge foundational knowledge you need before you start messing around at the command line. It's helpful if you understand, here's how Ethernet works, here's what a cable does, here's the tools that you use to be able to troubleshoot. Here are some basic network troubleshooting tools. Learn how to ping, learn how to trace route, learn the ARP command like we did today. Those are really going to help you when you get to CCNA, because first you'll be able to kind of skip over those fundamentals that they go through, but they go really fast through the fundamentals. They try to get right to the switches and routers, and you have to somehow take the knowledge of the switches that you're working with, and you're looking at the CAM tables, and you're trying to understand spanning tree. It helps if you have some foundation that you can build on, and the Network Plus, I think, really does that for you. So that's a pretty good jump. That's a pretty good move to go from to get that Network Plus and that foundational knowledge, and from there jump into the Cisco. If you have the ability to do that or the flexibility to do that, that's a nice path.
Okay.
Work through those. I think if you get through that, I think the knowledge, another thing I didn't mention there, but the experience that you already have at the help desk, the knowledge that you've already have from a practical experience perspective, I think basically replaces or negates the need to go back and get a formal A+. If you were trying to move into more of a role with operating systems, I would probably direct you over to the Microsoft side and not the A+ side. I think you've already covered the A+ in your practical job. I think now is time for you to go to the next step.
Okay, that makes sense.
Best of luck. I think it's a good path to go on, and it's a lot of fun. So enjoy that ride.
Awesome.
Thanks,
and
Evan.
then also for backend stuff, have you had a chance to look into anything with Ubiquiti or Unify equipment compared to the standards on stuff like Cisco, and how exactly those compare?
I haven't looked at their certification side. I know that they have one. It's certainly not as broad as what Cisco has had, because Cisco's been in kind of the business for a long time. But tons of people are using those. There's a kind of a similar argument to be made for the Juniper side of things, because Juniper has been in there for so long. There's a conversation going on in the chat room right now regarding Juniper, because Juniper is trying to compete in that area, and they've realized that certifying people in your product makes people want to use your product, and they're trying to get more people certified in their products as well. I come from a security side where I was competing with Juniper pretty solidly on the firewall side. It really wasn't a competition when we were going through it, but a lot of people considered that. So I sort of have my own feelings about that. It's just that Cisco is everywhere. It is pervasive. It doesn't look like it's going to be changing too much along those lines. But if you can get some of the niche things on the outside, the Ubiquitis, the Junipers, the Palo Alto networks, the checkpoints, all the way around the security and the networking side of things, there are customers, there are people, businesses and organizations where they may not have a lot of Cisco and they need somebody with that knowledge. And sometimes that niche knowledge can really help. It tends to be very geographical. There may be in your particular area a lot of people with Juniper and relatively few with Cisco, or you might be in a geography that's the opposite. So you kind of have to look to see what people are asking for in these job descriptions. That will probably help you decide yourself, okay, that's the direction I should be going. If you go to every job posting, they all say Ubiquiti, 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 it kind of helps make the decision for you.
That makes sense.
Best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I appreciate the call. That's one I think that when you get into trying to understand where you go with the path you take, a caller said this a while back, is that there's many ways to get there. I started my career working on Wellfleet routers. Wellfleet ultimately purchased by Nortel. But at the time, we evaluated Wellfleet and Cisco. And we chose Wellfleet. They had a better product. Cisco was not a better product. In fact, we looked at the two. Cisco had this horrible command line. Wellfleet had this well thought out graphical interface, or at least at the command line. It's sort of a VT100 type graphical interface, and an interface that was much easier to use. And they were crushing Cisco because of it. And then they got bought by Nortel. And as things do tend to happen in this industry, when a company goes public or a company is bought by somebody who is public, that is always a challenge to keep up. There's something that gets lost there, and it got lost for the folks at Nortel as well, unfortunately. It's one of those situations. Cisco, of course, what has happened is there. So focus on what people are using, focus on what people are asking for. You will eventually find your way. And even though I have that strong knowledge in Wellfleet routers to take me through my career, it worked out okay. You will eventually find your way around all of those places. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you learn TCP/IP on Novell NetWare, like I did, or you learn TCP/IP on Microsoft Windows, it's all still TCP/IP. You can still apply that to any router, to any switch, to any firewall, to any operating system. So the important part is to learn the fundamentals. Learn about TCP/IP. Learn about everything relating to spanning tree protocol. Learn about OSPF. Learn about those technologies because they all work exactly the same when you go from Juniper to Cisco to Ubiquiti to Palo Alto Networks to Checkpoint to whoever it is. It all works exactly the same way to be able to have all those things there. Back to the phones, the 214 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. My name is Avante. I am in Texas.
Hey, Avante. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Well, first off, I really want to say thank you for all of the work and content you put out. It is like the absolute resource that I use. I refer my friends to you, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for saying that. Appreciate it.
So, yeah, absolutely. Right now, I'm studying for the Security Plus, and I realized halfway through that I really have a passion for like the cloud. And so, is there anything or any path you might be able to recommend for me relative to that?
The cloud computing side of things is quite remarkable in its rapid embrace by everybody. Every organization, I don't know, in the world, a huge number of organizations are trying to do more with the cloud and faster. To the point, I have a son right now who is in college. He is getting a degree in cloud computing. He had an interest in it, and he said he had an interest in it. And I said, oh, good, because that's what you'll be doing then, because that's a great idea. because that's what everybody wants to know right now. So he's got a class in containerization. He's doing some Python. He's really going through the paces with virtualization. Just amazing, fantastic stuff that he's working on. That is a great place to be right now. It's a technology that we still have not figured all the way out yet. There are still new things we're discovering with cloud computing now to make these application deployments and application instance deployments even better and faster and easier. We're automating even more of it. We still have not figured it all out, is what I'm saying. So it's a fun place to be right now. It's very innovative. There's tons of companies trying to create new products for it. The cloud security side is fascinating to me right now with CASB and all of the other technologies around that. The operating system side is trying to keep up. So there's exciting things with operating systems you can do, especially with Microsoft and Azure. Amazing things that they're doing. So there's new innovation happening constantly in that particular field. But it all works together. If you're a networking professional, there's tons of cloud work you're going to be doing. There's virtual switches and virtual routers you're going to be building. You're going to learn how to orchestrate those. You're going to be learning how to use the APIs. You're going to be learning how to write Python scripts so that you can manage them. If you're on the security side, you're doing the same thing with firewalls on top of all of the other malware detection and vulnerability detection tools. There's huge things to do with APIs and being able to orchestrate those side of things. And of course, building out and creating containers of these applications and operating systems is on the cloud side as well. So it doesn't matter where you are in IT, the cloud piece of it, you're going to be working in, you're going to be touching, and the better you are at it, the better job you're going to have, the more flexibility you're going to have with the jobs that you're working on. So I think it's a fantastic area to go into. There's huge opportunity. You do kind of have to be at the top of your game because being able to work in the cloud means that you already know about the operating system. You already know about the network. You already know about the security. You now have to layer the cloud on top of that. And this becomes even more complex when you start talking about containers and being able to deploy parts of an application instance and being able to orchestrate that. A lot of fun. It is complex. It is involved, but I find that when you're in these IT positions that are complex, that are involved, they also tend to pay you a little better. So I find there's some probably financial benefits to being involved on the cloud as well. And once you learn it, you kind of got it. It's now time that you should start building on that knowledge. And if you can keep up with it, it's sort of like surfing right now. Everybody's on a board. We're trying to catch the wave and the cloud's moving fast. But if you can stay on that wave, you're going to be doing just fine. I think it's an exciting place to be.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, similar to a previous caller, I'm in a smaller shop where it's like 2 or 3 of us, and we're kind of balancing the networking, the IT, all that, just the whole package, the web even. So me, myself, I do a lot of hands-on IT, and so I already have A+, and that plus, and hopefully get my security plus. But I definitely think I want to pivot to the cloud because a lot of our infrastructure is managed by different vendors, so we don't really have a lot of stuff on-prem. And so that just kind of sparked my interest in, I think, possibly AWS, just because I know it's like a hot term.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where I'm at.
Those are good certifications as well to learn on. If you're trying to find a path, because it's such a broad set of paths. There's so many things to learn. You almost don't know where to start. Do you start with the containers? Do you start on the networking side? Do you go with the security pieces? Where do you build it up? Do you go with AWS? Do you go on the Azure side? Do you go with a third party? Do you go with the standards? And right to the standards. Everybody's a little bit different, but you can't go wrong with AWS certs. You can't go wrong with Azure certs. Microsoft obviously is really pushing their certifications on the Azure side. So either one of those is good. There's tons of employers asking for that. And quite honestly, once you learn how to orchestrate and use Python to make these environments dance for you, you can apply that knowledge to any of the cloud-based services. So don't worry that you may be starting in one place and you're not somewhere else. That's okay. You're going to be able to use these skills no matter where you go. And as soon as you get good at it, and you just take it a little bit of a time, take a little bite at a time, and learn the process to go through, and maybe it's the AWS or Azure certifications that helps you along those lines, that's a good knowledge to have throughout your entire career. You're going to use those skills everywhere you go throughout the rest of your IT career, no question.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like after Security Plus, maybe dabble with Python and try and get a good understanding of that for like orchestration purposes.
I think I'll start working on the Python side. I think Python's great to use not just for cloud, but for anything that you're doing. It has become the sort of the standard way to automate in almost everything that we're doing. Python and PowerScript go hand in, I don't say go hand in hand, but they are just as valuable as each other, depending on the environment that you're working on. And in some cases, go hand in hand with each other. Those are two amazing scripting skills to have. Get some Python knowledge, get some PowerShell knowledge, and get as much, you mentioned AWS, go for it. Just get that first initial AWS certification. Learn as much as you can about that and start expanding out your skills along those lines. Don't do one and then wait for the other. Kind of do them all at the same time because they do all build on each other.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for the content.
Best of luck, Devontae. You've got a lot of fun ahead of you. Congratulations.
Great. Good luck with your son and his studies.
Thanks. I appreciate that. That's going to be fun, too. He is heads down working on those cloud computing pieces, and it's exciting to see because I also know that that's the thing. As a dad, you want your kids to also be able to take these skills out into the world and do something with them. I feel pretty good about him having those skills. I think he's going to do just fine. Let's go to the 256 area code. There we go. Hit the right button. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Asen. I'm calling from Alabama.
Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Sir, first I want to say thank you so much for all the content you're putting it out. It's really helping everybody around us. And even though we bought the courses like your notes and practice exams, by the way, I'm trying to get the Security Plus, but the content you're putting on the YouTube, which is actually free for everybody, that is really amazing because that's where the future is going. Security is going to be the key because everything is going back on IT, and that's the crucial part of everybody, even though regular person's life. So thank you so much for that, sir.
Great to hear. My pleasure. What can we do for you?
All right. I have an IT background, so I'm a software engineer. I used to work for data as well. So I work on Hadoop and a lot of different technologies, including the Amazons. I'm trying for the Security Plus because that's the basic one. I have some questions, if you don't mind. Is the Network Plus necessary for me for a Security Plus?
One of the things, I guess it kind of depends on what you want to do. If you're just looking at the Security Plus certification on its own, there's not a lot of the Network Plus exam in Security Plus. I know a lot of people will look through the exam objectives and say it sure seems that way, but on the 501 exam, 11% of the exam objectives in Security Plus are exam objectives that are shared from the Network Plus side. Those 11% objectives are very broad objectives. For example, learning about what a load balancer is. Those are the same between Network Plus and Security Plus. There's probably a little bit more of a Security Plus spin on the Security Plus exam. Knowing how to do the backups. Today we did the incremental backup, differential backups. Those are in both Network Plus and Security Plus because there's a network side that's important to that, and there's a Security Plus component that's important to that. Those are practically identical between the two. But the content that is shared between those two is very broad content. And it's so broad that I tell people, don't worry about getting Network Plus. Just jump into the Security Plus, and those 11% of the topics will become things that you learn as part of your Security Plus tasks anyway. And they don't require that you have any type of prior network knowledge to be able to properly understand the concepts. So if you're worried about, do I need to pass that Network Plus before even taking Security Plus? No. Now, if you're later on your job, you're thinking, I need to become a security professional, then as someone who is a former systems engineer for a next-gen firewall company, I highly recommend you get as much networking knowledge as possible because you're going to need that when you get into those red team, blue team, purple team roles. That's going to be important in those organizations. To be that IT security professional, you have to have a knowledge in the network. But it's not required to pass your cert, your Security Plus cert.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So the next question is, like I said, I'm coming from the IT, like a software side. So what is the next certification after the Security Plus you can recommend? I'm not planning to go towards more like a network side. I can go like a software security side or probably a cloud. Like I know somebody was just mentioning about having a cloud certifications. But what is your suggestion? Like, I don't have a much knowledge about networking, but I'm not saying I'm very fascinated by the networking. I have like a 16 years of software engineering and a cloud, kind of a different kind of cloud experience. So it's not that I want to do, but I want to go somewhere where there's more like a software perspective rather than networking. What is your suggestion for the next certification you can think about?
Well, I mentioned there's a huge emphasis in security in the cloud. There are CASB technologies that are the cloud, being able to use security in the cloud to keep data secure, even though you're not close to the data. And there's a lot of companies doing using different technologies to do that. But it's all the big ones. So if you look at McAfee, for instance, they have a big CASB push. You look at other big players on the security side, there's that piece of it. But there's also, especially from a security perspective, and this might go back to the things you've been doing, a huge emphasis now in big data. There's an enormous emphasis in big data for security, because imagine having switches, routers, operating systems, authentication servers, VPNs, IPsec tunnels. There's all this data that you're creating in your company. There's also data that's being created out on the internet with vulnerabilities, attacks that are occurring, huge data sources that are out there. There needs to be some way to correlate all this data together. And there are some technologies that people are putting together right now that can identify security problems and security attacks in your infrastructure without using signatures, using big data and being able to correlate some of these data sources together. But having the knowledge to do that is outside the scope of the traditional IT security person. It takes more of a kind of a computer science scope to be able to manage that. There's a huge emphasis in the industry for sharing these vulnerabilities and being able to have constant feeds of attack data coming in. You can imagine that there's petabytes of data that you would have to sift through to be able to identify if that's happening to your organization and being able to protect your organization from that. So there may be some places where you can blend together the skills that you've had in the past with some of the things that we need to have on the IT security side, just to be able to identify when we might be attacked, stop the attacker when they get in or before they get in. Because once they get in, a lot of people don't realize once an attacker gets in your network, they're there for months collecting data. It's very common that once they finally find a breach, that they've been in here for a very, very, very long time. So IT professionals want to minimize or remove that time frame completely, but you can't do it unless you can sift through all of this data, and it's just impossible to do it through the traditional means. You can't just use a SIM anymore. You need some very, very broad, very well-honed big data technologies to be able to do that, and it's hard to find professionals who really know what they're doing. Not to mention all the other security technologies in the cloud like CASB and other virtual firewalls, virtual DLPs, and other ways to monitor some of that data. Plenty of places in the cloud to go with on the security side.
Perfect. That's what I used to do. Basically, like I said, Hadoop. I'm a big data professional. But like right now, I've been working with IT for a long time, so I want to stay in the career. I always was fascinated by the cybersecurity stuff, but never had a chance in my life because I'm a married person and I had a lot of stuff that I need to settle down before I jump into the new career. So right now it's time that I can jump into it. Perfect. And that's where I want to go. But like I said, what do you think is the best thing? Like Security Plus, I know, like you mentioned it, it's a good thing to go forward to get a job right now, just as a cybersecurity person. But then next is, do you think is a CYSA or basically CASP or something like that's going to help me to, before I go on a cloud certification, which is going to come out probably for a big data? Anything you think I can go for, like a CYSA, CASP?
I think those would be good places to go to learn more about what the employers are looking for. And it may be blending into more of the higher end security certs. If you've been in the industry a while, you may qualify to take the CISSP, which is a well-regarded broad security certification that's kind of a gold star on your security knowledge base. People look at that like, okay, you've got solid security foundations because you're CISSP certified. And the others that you mentioned, you may want to take niches from there. There are certifications that focus on pen testing. Well, maybe that fits or doesn't fit what you want to do. There's other certifications that focus on cloud security. Maybe there's opportunity there. Cisco has some interesting ones along those sides. Getting the knowledge on how to orchestrate all of these together is a set of skills that many employers are looking for. So just having the knowledge in PowerShell and Python and integrating those into any cloud computing might get you in the door in tons of places, and you haven't even done the hard part yet. So there's lots that you could take what you already know and leverage that towards what you want to do on the security side.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your help. Thank you so much for your advice, and best of luck for your son as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Best of luck. That's one I think that there are so many places to go. We've been talking a lot about cloud in the last number of calls, but obviously there's so many other places in IT you can go with. The cloud happens to be where a lot of action is happening right now. And as we found in the industry, if you go where the action is, there tends to be a lot of opportunity there. And so I'm not telling anybody to go any particular direction, because I think once you find a thing you like, it's just natural that you're going to become an expert in those things. Some people really like the cloud, and if it does interest you, I highly recommend you look at it. But if it's not your thing, that's okay. There are tons of other opportunities in the industry to be able to find your way in IT, and the opportunities are there. You just have to look around for them, find the thing you like, and keep learning, keep moving up, keep taking the steps to be able to make that happen. I think those are the things that are going to help you as well once you get into and understanding those goals. That's what I would recommend for every single one of you. Find that thing, take the next step up. That's going to help you regardless of what you plan on doing in your career. Well, that brings us to the end of another study group. We kind of went into overtime with that one, but I hope that's okay with everybody. I don't mind doing it. It's kind of fun to take the phone calls, chat with the chat room, take your phone calls and chat with you on the phone, which is a rare opportunity as well. Come back in a week. We've got our Security Plus study group next Wednesday. We'd love to have you come back. I haven't even written the questions yet. I got to get those done so that I'll know what to ask you in that first hour. And of course, we'll do even more Q&A in the second hour. You're welcome to ask your Security Plus or other questions from the chat room and on your phone calls as well. We look forward to that and seeing you along those lines. Thanks for being here. Thanks for visiting us. Thank you for your ongoing support with all the products that we have, not just the free videos we have online. You're welcome to watch and enjoy as much of those as you would like, but also your financial help of purchasing the products that we have that I think might help you with your certification. That helps us a lot here as well, and I do appreciate it. Thanks for everything, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.